The ring in the wall. I don't believe in demons. I don't believe in curses tied to the Scottish crown. But Edinburgh is different. This city makes belief itself feel fragile, like every stone and every alleyway is whispering a secret it has never told. It was winter, 2025. Wind knifed through the cobblestone streets, screeching like steel dragged across skin. Every night in the old town felt like walking inside a giant ribcage, where each joint groaned in the gale. I wasn't a tourist. I wasn't a scholar. I made my living telling stories of unsolved crimes, digging into old case files, stitching them into podcasts and videos. The darker the mystery, the hungrier the audience. The case that had haunted me for months. The death of Henry Stuart, Lord Darnley, husband to Mary Stuart, Queen of Scots, father of the future James VI. On the night of February 10th, 1567, his residence at Kirk O' Field exploded, but his body wasn't buried under rubble. It was found in the garden, whole, intact, terrifying in its perfection. He hadn't died by fire or falling stone. A rope had finished him. I'd read the files, the letters, the endless reports. Conspiracies stacked on conspiracies. Mary complicit, Bothwell scheming, the nobility conspiring, even Elizabeth I pulling strings. But the deeper I went, the darker the maze became. One local guide, after learning of my obsession, leaned close and whispered, "If you want to feel it, really feel it, go to Kirk O' Field. The wind there still keeps the breath of that night." I agreed. In my head, it was just another night shoot. Footage of ruins, smoke overlays, atmospheric filler. I packed my camera, my mic, my notebook. I never believed I would actually find something new. Kirk O' Field, present day. What remains? A gray shard of wall, a patch of uneven grass, a few dry tourism plaques. Visitors take a photo, then leave. But I stayed. The wind funneled through a crack in the stone, carrying a damp, salty breath, like a crypt opening. I pressed my palm to the wall, freezing. My fingertips found a groove, too straight to be natural. I reached in. My hand closed on metal. I pulled. A ring lay in my palm. Dull, tarnished, streaked with rust, but etched with a name, sharp and clear, Aidan. Shock locked me in place. Aidan, a name I'd seen only once in a stray record. A servant of Darnley. Mentioned once, crossed out once, then erased, as if history itself had deleted him. The ring chilled, colder, biting into my skin. I slipped it into my pocket, and the wind stopped. In its place, the thunder of hooves, the clash of swords, and far away, church bells tolling. I swung my flashlight at the wall. The crack sealed itself. Stones knit together. The entire wall was rebuilding before my eyes, as if time itself were running backward. A blast rattled my skull. Not once. Echoes, reverberating inside bone. The stench of gunpowder burned my lungs. When I opened my eyes, the world had changed. A 16th century street stretched before me, drowned in fog. Oil lamps flickered from a two-story house. Kirk O' Field, whole, untouched. I looked at my hand. The ring was no longer in my pocket. It was on my finger, fitted perfectly. I pulled nothing. Metal dug into flesh. Then, a voice rasped in my skull, like iron scraping stone. 5 rules keep you breathing. 1. Your blood is ink. 2. Heat means truth. Cold means lies. 3. Touch the anchor, doors open. 4. 2 words collide, fire will erase. 5. The ring keeps the words, never the man. Remember, the ring tightened, left a red welt on my skin. My jacket was gone. In its place, coarse wool, bound with heavy leather. In the pocket, a wooden token carved with the same name, Aidan. From the lit house, a voice called, "Aidan, quickly, Lord Darnley needs you." My body locked. That was no echo. It came from a living man's lungs. Step by step, I moved toward the door, like a fly pulled into the web of history. Inside the house, the air was thick with coal heat. Wood smoke choked the room. Candlelight shivered across warped beams. On the bed lay Darnley, propped on pillows, skin pale, lips blue, eyes bloodshot from sleepless nights. He coughed, violently, then fixed his gaze on me. "Aidan, who are you?" The question froze me. I couldn't confess. His stare was suspicion and desperation. I pressed a warm cloth to his chest. He seized my wrist. His hand was ice. "They whisper outside. I know. If I die tonight, remember this. It will be a man's hand, not God's. A dry laugh rattled from his throat. For a second, I didn't see a proud nobleman from the records. I saw a sick man, terrified, clutching at his final breath. The ring burns, the walls listen. Footsteps creaked in the hall. I cracked the door. Only darkness. In the corner, a chest gaped open. Inside, a scrap of Latin scrawled in haste. Mortem, ignis, perditio. Death, fire, betrayal. A gust blew. The candle died. The ring on my finger glowed red as blood. It cinched tight, slicing skin. A voice whispered in my head. You were chosen to witness. But to witness is to be buried. Sweat chilled my back. This was no story to tell. This was a trap. The clock tolled 11 times. Each note hollow, like iron striking bone. The far door creaked. A middle-aged servant stepped in, thin, hollow-eyed, carrying a bundle of wood and a copper kettle. The candlelight brushed his fingernails. A dark crust of ink clung to one, ink found only on scribes. He set the kettle on the coals, then turned, eyes landing on my hand. On the ring. His gaze sharpened. Recognition. A fine ring, Aiden. I thought it had been lost. My tongue stuck to the roof of my mouth. Darnley hacked, breaking the tension. The servant poured, herbs and spirits thick as fog. For the lungs, my lord. The night is colder than most. Darnley refused the cup. His eyes cut to me. Firelight flickered in his pupils, like dying embers. Lock the door, he rasped. The servant slid the bolt. Metal scraped wood, harsh and final. He returned, too calm. In the mirror's reflection, his shadow split. One still, one cocked, studying the ring more closely than the man himself. What's your name? I asked, voice cracking. Call me Muir. Everyone does. His movements were exact, rehearsed, like a man who had repeated them 1,000 times. A faint scar crossed his wrist, shaped like a feather. The ring warmed. Heat means truth. Truth about what? The man? The moment? Aiden, Muir said casually, eyes still on the cloth. If you hear dragging tonight, don't open the door. Why not? In a sick man's house, many things are dragged. Barrels, beds, bodies. Darnley chuckled bitterly. Here, ignorance is armor. Everyone pretends not to know, until a rope yanks their neck backward. The rope, the anchor, the fire. A knock at the door, 2 sharp raps. A man in a black cloak slipped inside. Hat brim low. The faint tang of gunpowder drifted with him. Muir didn't ask his name, didn't introduce, just gave him a glance toward the far corridor. The man nodded once. Gone like a shadow. On the hinge, a drop of resin slid down, hardening like frozen wax. My lord, Muir said, may I tend the hearth? The ashes are damp. They spark too easily. Do what you will. Darnley sighed, weary. Only let me die as a man. Not a joke. Muir bowed shallowly. Respect for someone who might be king or corpse. Then he left. I lunged to the hearth. Reached deep. My hand found something coarse. A coil of hemp rope. Strangled tight. I yanked it out, heart hammering. Hid it beneath the cot, buried under rags. You only delay them, Darnley muttered. They'll use another rope. Then I've bought us time. I shot back. He smiled faintly. A man who knew Dawn would never be his. His gaze slid to my hand again. Let me see the ring. I held it out. The metal froze. Frostbitten cold. Cold means lies. Good, Darnley whispered. That means I'm not its door. You know about things like this? He smirked. Here, silence itself is ink. Haven't you noticed? Before I could ask, Muir returned. Arms full of wet kindling. Resin dripping. More fire for warmth, he said. The fog tonight will soak even a sword. Flames flared. Resin crackled. In the sparks, I glimpsed black threads curling. Gunpowder dusted between the wood. I realized they didn't need barrels. A hearth against a thin wall would be enough. The fire was theater. The rope would do the killing. Muir, I asked, why the ink on your nails? He stacked logs, not looking up. By day, I copy ledgers. By night, I serve. Everyone here works twice. And a third? Darnley asked, eyes half shut. Listening, Muir answered. His glance cut to me. You should learn, too. Hear what the walls say. Outside, something heavy scraped across stone. Metal grinding rock. I flinched. Muir's shoulders tensed for a beat, then loosened. Don't open the door, he murmured flatly. Spare your eyes tonight. Spare my eyes. Yes, the first thing they kill here is what sees. The ring throbbed against my skin. pulling me toward the corridor, toward the red wax seal of anchor and beast. I touched it. The ring burned, froze, then burned again, like someone on the other side was hesitating. A slit of air hissed through. Ink, leather, voices layered on top of each other, whispering not words but counts. Scratches, erasures. The ring pulsed. The ring keeps the words, never the man. Aiden, Muir's voice cut behind me. He was suddenly there, carrying a strip of cloth. Help me bind the shutters. The fog presses in. I steadied the wood with him, but my eyes flicked to his left ear. Clean. No mark. I exhaled relief, until I saw another man, drifting at the far corridor. Cloak low. On his ear, a dark blotch. A birthmark like spilled ink. The ring seared. Muir, I whispered. We have company. He didn't turn. There's always company. Where did you hide the rope? Under the cot. Good. They'll search the hearth first. Should I? No. Just listen. He pressed me to the wall, right against the broken wax seal. From the hall, a barrel scraped, iron handles screeching. Sulfur stung the air. Voices hissed. Set it there, wait for the bell, pull the cord. Muir leaned in, his breath a draft through stone. When the church bell tolls, don't run out. Run down. Down where? Beneath the bed of the dead. They never bow. His words hit like cold water. He shoved me back inside, then melted into the corridor, his footsteps dissolving into other sounds, until it felt like the wall itself had swallowed him. The bed of the dead. Darnley sat upright, eyes blazing, sudden clarity. You found the rope? I hid it. Good. I won't die with rope under my pillow. I can get you out, through the back. No, he shook his head. Every door has hands. Only words go free. His gaze drilled into the ring. Promise me, if you live, right. Not to clear me. I don't deserve it. Right the strangling. Let the rope be remembered. I nodded. My throat snagged on the word promise. The ring cooled, like it approved. The bell, the rope, the fire. 3 knocks rattled the main door. Even. Measured. Darnley clenched his chest, bracing his heart. From outside, fibers rasped against wood. Rope testing its strength. Quiet, he whispered. The night has come. I doused a candle. The last ember glowed like a single red eye. In the dark, every sound magnified. Wet boots, rolling wheels, the wall itself exhaling. The ring beat against my pulse. Thud, 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 like ink dripping onto paper. Then a shadow slid past the crack of light. An arm, gloved, reptilian, searching the frame. On its ear, the birthmark, black as ink. The hand reached down, found the rope. It tightened. Wood groaned. And then, the church bell tolled. Down. Muir's voice hissed like wind through the doorframe. I ducked under the bed, pressed against the boards. Above me, rope against wood, boots against stone, breath steady and patient, like a hand dragging ink in a single, unbroken line. A chuckle, low, certain, the laugh of someone convinced history was bending to his will. A blast thundered outside the wall. Plaster rained on my face. The house shook, and the rope above me pulled tight. The servant erased from history. I stood in the doorway where the hallway's darkness touched the room's thin pool of light. Outside, the fog swallowed sound. Even the hidden men seemed to hold their breath with the night. Darnley leaned into his pillows, eyes locked on the ring on my finger, as if a lost talisman had chosen the exact night of its theft to return. The ring, he rasped, voice charred to ash. The first man who wore it swore to tell the truth, even if it cost him his life. I couldn't confess I'd fallen here from 2025, that Aiden was a borrowed skin. But looking at my hand, I understood. Tonight, history didn't want a bystander. It wanted a name to take responsibility. Knox, 3 short, 1 long. The middle-aged servant peered in. Ink darkened both of his pinky nails. My lord, he said evenly, they'd like to move you downstairs for warmth. The fog is cruel. Darnley muttered a curse, half Scots, half English, then a dry smile. Warmth? There's nothing warm in this house except the hellfire they're preparing for me. The servant flinched, bowed, withdrew. Darnley flicked his chin. I leaned close. If I don't see morning, take this. He pressed a small silver medallion into my palm, a quartered note folded inside. Go to St. Giles. Find Father Moray. Password is, the silversmith doesn't sleep. I tucked the medallion into my lining. In Darnley's eyes lived a very human fear, naked and proud at once. On parchment, he'd been insufferable. Here he was prey, cornered, refusing to bend. Downstairs, fire for theater, rope for truth. I left the room, took the narrow wooden stairs. The lower level stank of wet lime and skin. In the kitchen corner, 2 sacks tied with hemp lay like firewood. I crouched, saltpeter bit my throat. Beside them, a length of slow match, oiled hemp mottled with salt. On a coal scuttle, a red wax seal. An anchor cradling a beast's head, half intact, half broken. A bond signed. Tonight would not be improvisation. Aiden. I jolted. The middle-aged servant stood at my back, face carved from stone. Don't touch what isn't your task. Go sit the Lord. He ghosted past me, leaving a look I couldn't read, warning or invitation. From the rear yard came the drag of something heavy, whispers, then a laugh throttled in cloth. The ring warmed, pulsing with a life of its own. Heat means truth. Cold means lies. I followed the warmth to a side door. Through the crack, for silhouettes stood over a shallow pit. On the dirt, a scrap of cloth stamped with fresh, broken wax. They spoke fast, nameless. After midnight, the fuse burns down, but don't trust the fire. The real work's out here. The words struck my temple like a mallet. Fire for show, rope for the kill. I ran back up. At Darnley's ear I whispered, now. Not for heat, for an exit. He didn't ask. He stood. I took his shoulder and steered into the hall. A rear door gaped. We cut left to a low wall that dropped to a service lane. I counted my breaths, bit my tongue to quiet the thunder in my chest. We slid down the grass, and a figure peeled out of the bushes. Stop. I shoved Darnley forward. 2 more shapes closed the trap. A hand like iron clamped my nape, slammed my head into stone. Through the dizziness, I saw a loop of rope drop over Darnley's neck. He hacked, desperate. A gloved arm tightened, tendons standing like cables. A second man pinned his shoulders. A third gagged his mouth with rough cloth. I surged up. The ring flashed red hot. A vision whipped across my eyes. Daylight in this same yard. This same wall but torn with a hole. My hand, tucking a ring into a crack. A voice, mine, Aiden's, whispering. If anyone finds this, remember my name. The vision snapped. Night slammed back. The rope bit. A dry crack. Darnley's weight collapsed. The gloved hand released. They laid him on his side like a drunk. Time, someone said. Let fire do the rest. They slipped into the house like water into a drain. I knelt by Darnley. His eyes were a sliver, looking through me. Pulse dead. On his skin, long bruises shaped like fishhooks. I wanted to scream. My throat made the dumb sound of animals. I dragged his body lower, as if I could hide him from the night. Then the blast. Fire flowered inside the house. Stone bellied and burst. Plaster fell like rain. The shock threw my face into the grass. When I looked up, the sky was butcher red. Actors spilled from the fire. 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 Watchmen rushed. Church bells poured their long throat. The city woke to a perfect play. I closed Darnley's eyes. Lashes trembled, then stilled. A downstairs valet lay nearby, face down, intact, neck bruised. No one had died by flame. Fire had been hired. Dawn, writing the lie. At first light, they found the bodies. I'll take it. Why are they in the yard? A guard snapped. The steward's eyes glittered with opportunity. Right. Killed by house explosion. Bodies thrown into the garden. But their skin is unburned, sir. Right as I say. We don't need a second fire tonight. I stood among the servants, smoke grimed. The middle-aged servant glanced at me. This time his look carried away to live. Silence. The ring had cooled. The night's work was done. It had guided my eyes to the right place. As they carried the 2 bodies to a holding room, I slipped along the garden wall. At a bend, a cloaked figure stood still, watching the sky. Not fighting the fire. Not leaving. Just standing, breathing like a wound clock. You seen enough? He asked without turning. Who are you? Someone who likes stories told in the correct order. He smiled without his eyes. And I hate fire. It makes men lie more than usual. What do you want? Simple. Keep your mouth shut. Or, if you must open it, speak with the words we've already drafted. Useful ones like strangulation, hemp rope, slow match, which I'll hold for safekeeping. He stepped closer. On his left ear, a dark birthmark. The smell of new leather and resin. Not a brute, more a clerk with a fist. The sort who composes bonds, then seals them himself. And if I don't? I asked. Then the record will show a servant named Aiden disappeared after the blast. A polite shrug. Missing is a gentle death. No coffin, no rite, no memory. He slid into the smoke like a man going home. I leaned on the wall, sweat cold through coarse wool. The bells fell silent. The town whispered a new secret. A letter against fire. I left Kirk O'Field at the guard change. A side gate fed into a cul-de-sac where church walls pressed against old tenements. The ring tightened, tugging me to a crack. Inside the dark, a hollow. My heart kept a beat I knew from the future. I fed the medallion into the space. But first, I unfolded the paper and wrote in my own podcast cipher. Shift every letter 3. Keep the first consonant of each keyword. I listed the words that needed to live through fire. Strangulation, hemp rope, slow match, saltpeter sacks, bond, anchor, beast's head, left ear birthmark. The medallion clicked shut. The stone swallowed it like a mouth. The ring burned hot. The circle closed. One day, in 2025, I would come back and retrieve what I had hidden myself. The fire loop had started. So had the memory loop. I exhaled against the wall. The night's lines repeated in my skull. Don't trust fire. To witness is to be buried. If you won't be silent, Aiden disappears. I pulled my hood low and blended with the gathering crowd. Above, smoke thinned to a gray thread. Kirk O'Field receded like a cooling kiln. Ahead, St. Giles speared the sky, its dark spire a lance. The ring eased a half-breath, the right direction. The silversmith doesn't sleep, I murmured, testing the blade of the password. At the end of the lane, a black cloak waited. Not the birthmarked man, another. He raised a hand. Hurry, Aiden. The queen wants to hear what you saw. Blood drained from my face. Mary? So soon? Before the smoke stopped speaking? Or a trap dressed in titles? The ring trembled, neither hot nor cold. No verdict. For the first time since falling into the night, I had to choose. I glanced back. On the grass, the outline of a body was still fresh. The invisible loop of rope still lay there like a sentry. I turned and nodded. Lead. He took me down a narrow alley steeped in old rain. At its end, a shut wooden door. On the planks, someone had cut a small circle with a vertical line, and I laid my palm on it. The ring flashed a thin spark. The door opened. The darkness behind it wasn't night. It was a close room full of breath and whispering. In a ring of hoods and sleepless eyes, a woman's voice rose. A voice weighted by a lifetime of command and consequence. Speak, Aiden. Tonight. Who killed my husband? I lifted my head. At the room's center stood Mary Stuart. No crown. No jangling jewels. A simple dark mantle. Lamplight grazed a pale cheek and hollows carved by wakeful nights. She wasn't a painting's blaze. She was a knife wrapped in velvet, bright, thin, dangerous because it refused to break. Around her, 3 figures, a young cleric, a lowborn noble, and a scribe with inked hands at a corner table, a blank hide in front of him. I caught resin dust on his wrist, new leather on his coat. Here, words were weapons. Speak, Aiden, Mary repeated, eyes unblinking. Who killed my husband tonight? I hesitated a beat. The ring was neutral. No heat, no chill, no judgment. So the judgment would be mine. Your Majesty, I said slowly. Fire was hired. In the garden, a hemp rope went over his neck. A gloved hand pulled. Someone muffled him. Before that I saw saltpeter sacks and slow match. They planned the blast so the city would believe. The scribe's cool froze. He looked up, eyes glossy as wet ink, and smiled politely. Died by accidental explosion, he recited, as if pronouncing sentence. Bodies thrown into the garden. Right as words. Mary cut in, quiet, but blade clean. Strangulation. Write strangulation first. Then blow up anything you like. The scribe stalled for one held breath, then bowed and dipped the nib. The ink scraped the hide. In that sound I heard resistance, like a knife forced to carve letters it hated. Sweat beaded the young cleric's temple. Did you see a face? The low noble barked. A name? A crest. I shook my head, then added. A dark birthmark on a left ear. Resin and new leather. And a broken bond. Anchor cradling a beast's head. The scribe's mouth twitched. Mary caught it. She moved to his table, laid her hand on the hide. No substitutions. I don't need another play tonight. He bowed deeper, shoulders hiked, but his fist strangled the pen. If we write strangulation, the young cleric trembled. By morning, the whole city will crack. Mary faced me again. Her features didn't soften, but her eyes took on another layer, like someone had painted more ink into them. Aidan. She used the name the knight was trying to erase. Do you carry anything of Darnley's? The medallion. My hand, no longer fully mine, found it in my lining. I set it on the table. The scribe reached. Mary stopped him, fast, decisive. I will. She opened it. The paper inside was thin as onion skin. Her eyes flicked to mine. What did you do to it? I didn't look away. Encoded a few keywords. If the wrong hand opens it first, they'll read garbage. The corner of Mary's mouth moved. Not a smile, but the reflex of someone recognizing their kind. A person who can hide words inside words. Password, she asked. The silversmith doesn't sleep. The cleric jerked. Father Moray. Mary raised a hand. She set the medallion before the scribe. Seal it again. New wax, no scent, no crest. Deliver to St. Giles before Massachusetts. A beat. And do not open it. The scribe bowed. Yes, your majesty. Displeasure flashed, thin but real. He lived by opening other people's letters. And you? Mary turned back to me. Close enough that I caught the faintest lavender at her collar. You have seen. By morning, mouths will race to tell things you did not. They'll name me. They'll cry one name. She didn't say it, but Bothwell drifted through the room like a black bird. I had no way to save him, Mary said, voice as low as wet ash. I can only save the words. And when the words save me, they also kill me. Her eyes locked into mine. Can you write? It wasn't a plea. It was a command from a woman who hadn't decided whether to weep or to avenge. All right, I said, dry-mouthed. Not for anyone. I'll write so it can't be erased. Across the room, the scribe lifted his head again, as if he'd scented competition. He dipped the nib, tilted his ear. Behind him, a side door shivered. A figure slid past, left ear clean. Half relief. The main door opened. The middle-aged servant, Muir, entered, head bowed, ink still caked in his nail beds. He knelt low. Your Majesty, the guard requests authority to seal the grounds. The steward proposes a report before the crowd floods the garden. Seal it, Mary said without turning, and ban the phrase thrown into the garden. Yes, Your Majesty. Muir's eyes flicked to me, unchanged, but darker deep down, as if someone had added a fresh line to the ledger. Mary gave a signal. Muir withdrew. I swallowed cold air. If I give you safe conduct, Mary said carefully, can you survive today? I don't know. I told the truth. But if I die, I'd rather die with words. For a heartbeat, Mary's eyes softened, not out of pity, but recognition. She unpinned a small mother-of-pearl clasp from her cloak and put it in my hand. Take it. If you're stopped, say I sent you. If they drag you into a report, keep silent until you meet Father Moray. There, open the medallion with the password and say the first 3 words, strangled by rope. The rest, leave to those who know how to write it. Those who know how to write. I echoed. Here, Mary said, her gaze touching the scribe. Letters have factions. The room trembled faintly. The street outside had found its voice. Witnesses began to emerge from alleys, mouths full of ash and rumor. Mary drew up her hood. Her face slid back into shadow. Go, Aidan. When the fire stops speaking, I'll be forced to. Until then, let your words go ahead of mine. I bowed. As I turned, the scribe drifted across my path, blocking half a step. He spoke low just for me. What ink do you use, little servant? My own blood, I said. He smiled without joy. Then don't let it dry before it reaches our desk. I left the room, a corridor tight as a stone tooth. The ring thrummed, neither guiding nor forbidding. Rain-streaked alleys. St. Giles ahead. At the corner, a squad of guards barred the way. I lifted Mary's mother-of-pearl. Their captain wavered, stepped aside. As I passed, a gloved hand settled on my shoulder. Aidan, a sword-smooth voice breathed at my nape. In the right order, yes? I turned. The left ear birthmark was a blur in the rain, eyes black under the brim. The bondwriter had been waiting, unhurried, as if rereading a chapter he knew by heart. If I write the wrong order, I said, what will you do? I'll correct it, he shrugged. With a pen, or a rope. Then I'll write something you can't correct. Don't be foolish. Everything written can be corrected. No, I said. Memory. A second of quiet steel between us. The ring warmed, just a touch, like a nod. "Go," he said, withdrawing his hand. "And remember, don't trust the fire. It makes men exaggerate." I crossed the checkpoint, joined the stream surging toward the church. Rain drew a curtain. On St. Giles' Tower, the cold clock pointed to the hour when the report would begin. I clenched the medallion. Mary's mother of pearl bit my palm, a pass thin as onion skin. At the church door, a priest in black waited, eyes deep, wakeful by design. "The silversmith doesn't sleep," I said. He looked at my ring, not my face, then nodded, almost imperceptibly. "Come in, son. In here, we write with ink that doesn't burn." The heavy door yawned. Ink and leather breathed out like a dark draft. I stepped into a darkness made of words. The blood-dimmed dusk of a marriage. I raised my head. At the center of the close, lamplit room stood Mary Stuart. No crown, no clattering jewels. Oil light licked a pale cheek and hollows carved by wakeful nights. She wasn't the blaze of a portrait. She was a knife wrapped in velvet, bright, thin, dangerous because it would not break. Around her, three figures, a young cleric, a low-born noble, and a scribe with ink-stained hands at a corner table before a blank hide. New leather on his coat, a dried resin smear on his wrist, the kind who drafts and seals in the same breath. Here, words were weapons. "Speak, Aidan. Who killed my husband tonight?" Mary didn't blink. The ring on my finger neither burned nor chilled. No verdict. The responsibility would be mine. "Your Majesty," I said slow. Fire was hired. In the garden, a hemp rope went over his neck. A gloved hand pulled. Someone muffled him. Before that, saltpeter sacks. Slow match. The blast was to make the city believe. The scribe's hand paused. He looked up, eyes glossy as ink, and smiled politely. "Death by accidental explosion, bodies thrown into the garden." Mary cut him off, voice low, edge clean. "Write his words. Strangulation. Put strangulation first. After that, blow up what you like." He bowed and dipped the nib. The ink scraped the hide, like a blade forced to carve letters it hated. Sweat beaded on the cleric's temple. "Did you see a face?" the low noble snapped. "A name? A crest?" I shook my head, then added, "A dark birthmark on a left ear. Resin and new leather. And a broken bond. An anchor cradling a beast's head." The scribe's mouth twitched. Mary caught it. She stepped to his table and set her hand on the hide. "No substitutions. We don't need another play tonight." He bowed deeper, but his knuckles stood out on the pen. "If we write strangulation," the young cleric quavered, "by morning, the city will split." Mary turned back to me. Her face didn't change, but her eyes deepened, like fresh ink layered over old. "Aidan, do you carry anything of Darnley's?" "The medallion." My hand found it. I set it on the table. The scribe reached. Mary blocked him, quick and decisive. "I will." She opened it. The paper inside thin as onion skin. Her eyes asked without speaking, "What did you do to it?" "I encoded keywords," I said. "If the wrong hand opens it, they'll read garbage." Mary's mouth moved. No smile, just recognition. Someone who could hide words inside words. "Password. The silversmith doesn't sleep." The cleric flinched. "Father Moray." Mary lifted a hand. She placed the medallion before the scribe. "Seal again. Unscented wax. No crest. Delivered to St. Giles before Massachusetts. And do not open it." He bowed. "Yes, Your Majesty." Displeasure flashed, thin, real. He lived by opening other people's letters. "And you," Mary said to me, close enough that the faintest lavender rose from her collar, "you have seen. By morning, mouths will race to tell what you did not see. They will call me complicit. They will chant one name." She didn't say it, but Bothwell crossed the room like a black bird. "I could not save him," Mary said, voice low as wet ash. "I can only save the words. And when the words save me, they will also kill me. Can you write?" It wasn't a plea. It was an order from a woman not yet sure whether to weep or to avenge. "All right," I said, dry mouth. "Not for anyone. I'll write so it cannot be erased." In the corner, the scribe lifted his head again, as if he'd scented competition. His nib dipped. A side door quivered. A figure slipped by, the left ear clean. Half a breath of relief. The main door opened. The middle-aged servant, Muir, entered, head lowered, ink still black in the nail beds. He knelt. "Your Majesty," The guard is at the gate for sealing orders. The steward proposes a report before the crowd reaches the garden. Seal it, Mary said without turning, and ban the phrase thrown into the garden. Yes, Your Majesty. Muir glanced at me, unchanged on the surface, darker at the bottom, as if he'd written another line in a hidden ledger. If I give you safe conduct, Mary asked, measured, can you live through today? I don't know, I said, but if I die, I'd rather die with words. For a heartbeat, Mary's eyes softened, not pity, recognition. She unpinned a small mother-of-pearl clasp and pressed it to my palm. Take it. If you're stopped, say I sent you. If they drag you into a report, keep silent until you see Father Moray. There, open the medallion with the password and speak the first 3 words, strangled by rope. The rest, leave to those who know how to write it. Those who know how to write. I echoed. Here, Mary said, flicking a look toward the scribe. Letters have factions. Noise swelled outside. Witnesses were arriving with mouths full of ash and rumor. Mary drew up her hood. Her face slid into shadow. Go, Aiden. When the fire stops speaking, I will be forced to. Until then, let your words go one step ahead of mine. I bowed and turned. The scribe drifted across my path, blocking half a step, voice small enough for only me. What ink do you use, little servant? My own blood. He smiled without joy. Then don't let it dry before it reaches our desk. St. Giles. Ink that doesn't burn. I followed a corridor tight as a stone tooth, then ran through rain-black alleys towards St. Giles. At the corner, guards barred the way. I raised the mother of pearl. The captain hesitated, stepped aside. As I passed, a gloved hand settled on my shoulder. Aiden, a sword-smooth voice at my nape. In the right order, yes? I turned. The left ear birthmark blurred in the rain, eyes black beneath the brim. The bondwriter stood as if rereading a chapter he knew by heart. If I write the wrong order? I asked. I'll correct it, he said, with a pen or a rope. Then I'll write something you can't correct. Don't be foolish. Everything written can be corrected. No, I said. Memory. A second of quiet steel. The ring warmed, just a nod. Go, he said, withdrawing his hand. And remember, don't trust the fire. It makes men exaggerate. I crossed the checkpoint and flowed with the crowd. Rain hung like a curtain. On St. Giles Tower, the cold clock pointed to the hour the report would begin. I clenched the medallion. Mary's clasp bit my palm, a pass thin as onion skin. At the doors, Father Moray waited in black, eyes deep and purposefully sleepless. The silversmith doesn't sleep, I said. He looked at my ring, not my face, then gave the smallest nod. Come, son. In here, we write with ink that doesn't burn. The heavy door yawned. Ink and leather breathed out like a dark draft. I stepped into a darkness made of words, not cold emptiness, but a weight you could feel. Oil lamps, low along the pews, dripped amber onto stone. In a left-side chamber, writing tables crowded together like operating slabs, their tops scarred by old knives, freckled with wax and resin. On the wall hung leather thongs with quills, black jars, wax cords, wooden seals. A pendulum clock ticked in tiny beats, pinning the room's pulse to time. Moray shut the door behind me. His hand was dry and steady. He didn't ask my name. He looked straight at the ring, the gaze of a man who had read that word many times. Only now it sat on a living hand. Come deeper, Moray said, voice low, without a single tremor. We don't argue by shouting here. We count with words. He led me down a narrow way to a low-beamed alcove where 4 black-robed clerics sat, ink-handed, eyes red from wakefulness. Beside them, a man without robes but with a leather belt like a tradesman, big hands, resin in the nails, a scar like a wrong stroke across the back of his hand. He looked up, measuring me like a new tool. Sit, Moray said, pointing to a low chair at the head of the long table. Speak in the order you witnessed. One writes, one cuts and seals. No metaphors, no judgments, only words. I wanted to begin with fire was hired, but Moray lifted a hand, conducting. First, the hour. 11 tolls, then, a knock, 3 short, 1 long. After that, heavier fog, the scrape of a barrel, the roll of wooden wheels. A quill scissored across hide. The gray-haired cleric read back each piece, to keep the words from running astray. 11 tolls, 3 short, 1 long. Fog. Barrel. Wheels. Beside him, the tradesman shaved wax into thin ribbons, readying seals. The knife clacked, sharp enough to make sound clean. The stranglers, Moray said, eyes steady on me. How many? What hands? 3. One pulled, one pinned the shoulders, one gagged. The puller wore gloves. Cords jumped in his forearm. I paused, the view from the ground still wet in my lungs. A dark birthmark on a left ear, seen as he crossed the window. Birthmark. Left ear. The cleric repeated. Gloves. 3 men. Record. The rope. Moray. Hemp, soft, damp. Oiled, so it would slide. Bruises on the neck like hook marks. What oil? The tradesman asked. First words, voice rough. Resin. With sulfur. Those two argue. He nodded, half to his own hands. But with the right ratio, they obey. Good. He scored the wax and set a tiny strip beside hemp rope, as if writing with material, not just ink. If someone screamed, liar, they could make him smell it. Taste it. History would side with the scent. The fire. Moray. Fire didn't kill, I said, each word its own stone. Fire was hired. Slow match in the hearth. Saltpeter sacks below. Fresh resin on the logs. The blast came after the rope tightened. Right order, Moray breathed. Approval disguised as air. Order is the bone of words. The ring warmed, one long, living beat. I slid my hand under the sleeve. Your blood is ink, the rule whispered. I didn't want them hearing it, didn't want anyone trying it. The bond. Moray asked. What mark? Anchor cradling a beast's head. Red wax split, half still on the barrel's base. Anchor, beast, the cleric echoed, writing, dotting. No owner recorded. You did right, Moray said, eyes softening. Don't write a name without proof. Names save and kill. The tradesman reached for my wrist with a silent request. I glanced at Moray. He nodded. The tradesman turned the ring a fraction. Cold. He released me fast, as if he'd touched a coal. This doesn't belong to me, he murmured to his own palm. But it knows the way. Moray arched a brow, but asked nothing. He pointed to the youngest cleric, dark crescents under his eyes, a mouth that couldn't hide its temper. Map the yard. Let him mark it. They stretched a thin hide. Rough sketch. Wall, door, pit, hearth. I marked the spots I'd hidden in, the bed's lip, the hearth side, the grass. My hand paused over the wall crack where I'd stashed the medallion. No, that place had to remain small. I pointed near, not at, the true spot. The way you indicate a knife on a table by touching the handle, not the blade. Moray watched, a faint seam of approval at his eye. He understood how those who guard words also guard places. Who brought you in to marry? The young cleric blurted, voice edged. You're a servant. How did you reach the queen directly? Someone without a face. From the dark alley. With a summons. I assume. I lifted my eyes to Moray, the faction of letters. There are no factions here, the young cleric snapped. Only God and truth. Both have people who read for them, I said, surprised at my own boldness. And who reads, writes. And who writes? I nodded at the tradesman's knife. Sometimes cuts. The air thickened for a beat. Moray clipped it before it coalesced into quarrel. Enough. Continue. I finished. The birthmark, the leather smell, the sword-smooth voice, the warning about order. When I said, memory can't be corrected, the ring pinched hot, as if someone behind a door had nodded. You use the word memory, Moray said. You understand it better than most. What? I almost told him, because I come from a later world where memory is data and anyone can retouch the photo of their life with a button. I didn't. I only smiled, spent. Because night taught me. Night doesn't speak. It shows. The tradesman muttered. That's a good line. Good lines get burned. Moray closed a roll, pressed a crestless seal. Unscented wax fell with the sound of a held breath, let go. He nodded to a cleric who slid through a rear door. The copy. North Passage. St. Giles before Massachusetts. Footsteps drained into the church's body like rain. Moray faced me. The master copy, he said, his voice dropping in pitch. We'll read it aloud. They'll hate it. Hate is a sign of truth. Father, the young cleric began. If we read strangulation this morning, the court will. He didn't finish, but I heard Bothwell scrape his throat. The court will do its business, Moray said. We'll do ours. Our ink is hard to burn, not immortal. That's why more than one copy. His eyes fell to my ring. For the first time, a shadow passed behind them. And sometimes, to keep words alive, we borrow blood. I slid my spine. Your blood is ink. The ring's law offered itself up like a lesson. Now, Moray said, the right. From a drawer he brought a small leather flask, a silver quill, hair fine, and a tiny wooden tile carved with an anchor. He set them in the center. The young cleric's mouth flattened. The tradesman held his breath. The knife froze mid-air. From this moment, Moray intoned, you are no longer a witness. You are a writer. He who writes before an event will be read after it. But he who writes against an event, his eyes touched the ring, will be read by the event. I knew what he meant before he said it. The ring warmed like a child lifting its arms to be carried. We don't ask for blood, only a mark. He brushed the silver quill along the outer rim of the ring, then nicked my fingertip, a line thin as hair. One red bead rose and held. Moray caught half a drop on the quill and touched it to the anchor tile. The red spread into a ring so fine it seemed to outline the hint of a beast's head around the anchor. Done, Moray said. One drop. The rest is words. The ring quieted. My heart settled. This wasn't devilry. It was a way to moor a man to a pledge. If I betrayed the order, this anchor would pull me down like a stone. You've chosen, Moray murmured, only for me. You may leave if you wish. We don't keep men. We keep words. I'll stay, I said, surprised the answer arrived before fear. I saw. Good. Moray gestured. Tea. Black bread. Salt. We read at the 7th bell. A tray appeared. Bread black as coal. Salt white as bone. I broke a shard. Salt sparked on my tongue. Ink breathed around us like a fragrance chosen by those who had tattooed words into their lungs. Footsteps above. A quarrel in the narthex. Early, guards and the steward. Moray signaled the copy down the north passage. The tradesman belted it and passed it to the gray-haired cleric, who vanished behind a coarse curtain. Stay here, Moray told me. When they ask, don't speak with hot blood. Speak with bone. Where's the bone? He tapped the table in rhythm. Hour, order, hands, rope, scent, fire, after, before. No names. Not yet. The door swung wide. The steward entered, face sleek as a fresh polished seal, 3 guards behind him, hobnails rasping stone. Father Moray. He bowed just to the letter of courtesy. We've come to record. A dreadful night. God be kind. God is kind to words, Moray said, unsmiling. Here before you write. The steward's eyes scanned the table and paused half a second on the anchor tile. One corner of his mouth lifted, not a smile. The look of a man checking where a chest locks. You, he pointed to me. Name. The ring warmed, a quick tap. I don't know. Muir's warning from last night chalked bright in my mind. I don't know, I said. They call me Aidan. Don't know? The steward arched a brow. Moray slid in, soft voice, hard grain. In here, names are the last thing on paper. We prioritize order. Very well. The steward laid a steel pin on the table, measuring me like temperature. Order. I told it again, Moray's cadence in my bones. Hour, knock, fog, barrel, wheels, 3 men, gloves, birthmark, oil, rope, pull, fire after. Each word slotted into an invisible board. The steward nodded in a few places, frowned in others. At left ear birthmark, he cut his eyes to the tallest guard. The man's hand drifted toward his ear, then snapped back as if pricked. Conclusion? The steward said. Death by strangulation. Fire afterward. I looked straight at him when I said the 2 stone words, strangled by rope. He lifted a corner of his mouth. Right, killed by explosion. Bodies thrown into the garden. To the scribe. And right. According to a person of unknown identity. The quill stalled. Ink swelled to a drop on the tip. I heard the bone in the sentence begin to crack. No, Moray said lightly. Light like a millstone. Right. According to testimony affirmed by the church. His hand settled on the anchor tile. And right strangulation before explosion. The air changed. Guards glanced at one another. The steward laughed in the back of his throat. Since when does the church perform forensics? Since words began to burn, Moray replied. Fire has done its work, woken sleepers. The rest is ours. They measured each other, 2 scales seeking balance. The ring hummed at my finger, like a plucked string only the player can feel. Right both. the steward said at last, putting starch back into his pride. Strangulation and explosion. The order, he tilted his head at me, is editorial. Moray didn't fight the phrasing. He slid the anchor tile nearer the scribe's pen in a small courtly nudge. A polite piece on the right square. The taking of testimony dragged on until the 7th bell hissed through the ring. The steward withdrew with his guards, carrying their copy and their seal. When they were gone, Moray let the room breathe. "You kept the bone," he said, laying a hand over my chest as if thanking heart and lungs at once. "But the night hasn't pulled in all its claws." "I know," I whispered. "There's Bothwell, and the men who draft bonds. And the ones in gray you haven't met straight on," Moray said, eyes sliding toward a dim corner. "Here, everyone works twice. Some copy by day and erase by night." He handed me a small pouch, dry ink powder, and a quill tip already worn. "Take it. When you can't run, write. Don't let them write for you." I nodded. The ring warmed, right? When I stood, the tradesman leaned close, resin breath rough. "If you meet the man with gloves, look for a slice between forefinger and thumb. Hemp bites there. No glove stops it. That cut is his name." "Thank you," I said, tightening my hand on the ink pouch. On the way to the narthex, Moray paused at a stone column scratched with a faint eye, a circle and a vertical line, twin to the door where Mary had summoned me. He spoke without looking at me. "The eye door. We open it when we need a third eye. You're already wearing one. Don't open it too long, or it will look back." I understood. He meant the ring. And the other door, the one opened by anchors and blood, doesn't always lead you out. We reached the vestibule. Outside, morning had gone gray. The crowd swirled into a vortex, voices weaving a web strong enough to snare a real bird. At the bottom step, Muir stood with a rolled cloth under his arm, waiting for orders. He looked at me, neither nod nor shake, eyes writing a short line across me and folding it away. "Go," Moray said. "And remember, don't trust the fire. Trust the order." "I'll come back," I said, "when I have a name." "Names come last," Moray said again, clicking the lock on the lesson. "Don't let a name kill the words." I pulled up my hood and went down the wet steps. The ring eased, an animal fed. I looked up at St. Giles' black spear of stone. In the press below, a cloaked figure stood slightly apart, head tilted, as if listening to an invisible parade. His left ear was clean. Not him, but resin still ghosted the air, like fingerprints in wind. I sank into the current of bodies. In my pocket, the medallion lay still, a fish swallowing its tail. In my palm, Mary's mother-of-pearl pressed a reminder. If stopped, say she sent me. At my side, the ink pouch clicked faintly as I moved. I repeated the bone under my breath. Hour, order, hands, rope, scent, fire, after, before. Then the name, last. A gust lashed the street, carrying cold ash from Kirk O'Field. The ash slapped my cheek like a hand. I swallowed sulfur and walked faster. Behind me, the 8th bell dragged just long enough to remind me. The writer must move one step ahead of the reader. And there is always a man holding a rope around the next corner. I didn't look back. I wrote my sentence with my feet. Left at the market, past the tanner's wall, into the alley with the eye carved on the door. Maybe there, another door would open. Maybe there, a name would finally appear. For now, all I had were ink, a ring, and the order. Enough to live to the next line. Enough not to burn. Bothwell, the fox in the hand of blood. When I left St. Giles, the rain still freckled my cloak. In my palm, a cramped scrap of the real Aiden's handwriting. Hemp rope, gunpowder, bond. Pronouncements as thin and sharp as a blade. They didn't kill you, but they drew memory until it bled. The slope by the palace was slick. A troop of riders thundered past, steam from flanks, hobnails clacking on stone. The leader wore half-plate, a black mantle at his shoulders, a pointed beard, eyes like bottomless wells. No introduction needed. James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell. In the files I'd read in 2025, his name clung to cold theories. Lover of Mary, enemy of Darnley, possible author of the strangling. Bothwell reigned, and his gaze cleaved the crowd like a knife. When it met me, a chill ran the length of my backbone. Not because he could see into futures, but because in his eyes everyone was a piece on a board. Aiden, a man-at-arms, barked. Come, pulled into the street's center. I found him looking at me through smoke and authority. "You served Darnley last night?" he asked. "Yes, my lord, I managed." "How did he die?" The question was narrow as a needle. Memory offered only the rasp of hemp. My voice came out strangled. "The house blew up, and my lord was thrown into the garden." Bothwell's mouth curled, part belief, part disdain. "Write that down. Don't let any mouth say otherwise." He leaned close. Hoarse breath and whiskey hit my face. "Because if another story comes, your neck could be the next one the rope remembers." He slapped my shoulder like a seal. The horse's hooves spattered mud across my cloak, brown blotches like coagulated blood. That afternoon, I was summoned to a quiet tavern on the edge of town. The door was shut, curtains drawn. Wine ran, but laughter didn't reach the eyes. Bothwell sat in the center with 7 or 8 noblemen, daggers stuck in the table like stakes. Someone unrolled a bond, another anchor with beast head seal, stitched among household emblems. They spoke plainly as counting. "We removed Darnley. Now Bothwell marries Mary. The country needs a man." Bothwell feigned modesty. In the shadow under his lid a thrill flashed, the satisfaction of a board shrinking to his plan. "What do you want in return?" he asked. "Lands, towns, and the silence of history." Laughter, dry and mutual. I edged into a corner. Bothwell's stare cut across. "And you, Aidan? What do you want?" If I said truth, I would die then. If I said silence, I signed the erasure. I bowed, only to serve the rightful lord. A pause. Wine. Then the toast. Good. The rightful lord is me. That night, in my tiny rented room, I poured the ring under candlelight. The metal gleamed like wet ink. The inscription rearranged itself in my mind to a sentence. "He who kills the husband will take the wife." My ribs beat against the sentence. I knew from history that Mary would wed Bothwell after Kirk O'Field, but seeing men twist rumor into a blade, turning dirt into a hilt, made my stomach knot. Was Mary complicit, or simply a piece someone expected to move diagonally and instead shoved straight? Morning called me to Holyrood. Mary sat in private chambers, hollowed by sleep, but with an eye sharpened by fog. A damp letter lay on the table, ink still wet, and addressed to Elizabeth. She looked at me. "Aidan, how long have you served him? Was he deserving?" The rope hummed in my head. My mouth found one word. "No." She closed her eyes. One tear fell onto the parchment and bled the word sovereign like faint blood. "I know," she said. "History does not remember tears. It remembers power." She moved to the window. In the courtyard, Bothwell exercised his mount. Hooves beat like a rehearsal drum. "Perhaps only a fox can hold the hedge," she murmured. Maybe to me, maybe herself. Edinburgh tightened into rumor after that. Smoky, close as a cage. Who killed him? Is Mary complicit? Will Bothwell marry her? I trailed the retinue to a stone house where Mary lay hidden. Bothwell was already there, cloak damp with mist, hat in hand like a man at courtship instead of conquest. The door snapped open. I was supposed to pour wine. Now I had to watch. "Your Majesty." Bothwell bowed with the practiced charm of a man who uses honey to open throats. "The city is unmoored. They need guidance, someone unafraid of blood." Mary's face lifted, red-rimmed eyes still razor bright. "And you think you are that man?" she asked. He smiled, crossed the room, and took her hand not as a servant, but like the man stepping into a claim. "I don't think. I know." Mary's hand trembled. Was it anger? Relief? And she did not pull away. My real Aidan's note surfaced in my head. "He who killed the husband will take the wife." Bothwell bent to whisper. I heard no words, only a shift, resistance to hesitation to, impossibly, a thin surrender. A few nights later the court feasted. Music played, but none of the laughing was true. The night was an attempt to legitimize a blade with parchment. I carried a tray and my hands shook less from wine than from a vow I felt I was carrying for someone else. "We support Bothwell for the Queen," a noble declared, goblet high. "Red wine like fresh blood." "Let Darnley be forgotten," another cried. "For Scotland's future." Bothwell raised his cup. His hand trembled with something like excitement. The hunter near the prey he named. Mary sat pale at the table's end, jaw set. Her hand lay flat on the wood, where a crude notch gaped like a reminder that every covenant is stained. Rumor of the wedding spread like a gale. Soldiers cleared streets, tailors hustled, The ritual writers rehearsed phrases until marriage sounded like coin. People threw stones outside the gates. Blood turned the flagstones. I stood in the crowd, hood up, feeling rage turn itself into a drumbeat, an army without commanders. In the records I'd read, Mary's reputation unraveled after the marriage. Seeing it happen, I realized she lost more than a crown. She lost the tether to the people. The ring on my finger pulsed, counting down to a moment already written. It came on a rainy night. Mary returned from the chapel, and Bothwell's cavalcade split the road as if the sky had been cut. Horses reared, steel flashed, cloaks whipped. Mary was dragged from her carriage. She screamed, fear braided with fury. "This is my command," Bothwell roared, eyes burning like hearth coals. "The Queen will be my wife, though all Scotland resist." I was shoved into mud. For an instant I saw her tied, hoisted to a saddle. Guards slumped along the way. People later would call it Mary's abduction. Up close, I saw it for what it was, a wedding forced with a blade, to be later inked into law. Dunbar swallowed people like a maw. I slipped into the old servant's shadow. The stone room smelled of sea and iron. Mary sat by the window, straight back though exhaustion had carved her down. Bothwell entered and raised a cup. I showed them who rules Scotland. "She will be queen." She didn't answer, only turned and said, "Aidan, you still here?" I wanted to tell her I wasn't Aidan, that I came from a century set to make films about her, that I was a misplaced witness. She needed a name that hadn't been scrubbed from the record. "I'm here, Your Majesty." A single tear dropped on her hand. Bothwell watched, lifted a corner of his mouth, and left like a man who'd shut a door into someone's heart. Late, when Mary slept a fitful, guarded sleep, I found another scrap of the real Aidan's handwriting inside the desk, a shaky note. "If anyone still carries my name, remember, love in this court saves no one. It only becomes the rope that strangles." My hand clenched around the paper until the folds creased. I understood why the name Aidan was crossed out in the official record. They scrubbed the fingers that touched truth. Now I, a man borrowing the name, stood in that same smudge. The ring tightened like a warning. "You are not to slip away." I started watching Bothwell closely, searching for the human seam beneath the fox scale. In the riding yard, he ordered men to stop harassing townsfolk, drove a drunken soldier away, picked up a fallen knife and returned it. "Do not drop the thing that keeps the road straight," he said. Then, the same night, he signed another bond, each word hammered, for the kingdom's order. Those moments complicated him. Just a little less devil, or perhaps more dangerous, cruelty with an argument. I heard him to his inner circle. "I don't trust justice on paper. I trust what makes people quiet." A nation that fights and starves needs simple answers, silence and force. If history wants to call me fiend, so be it, so long as the border doesn't fall to the weak. The sentence stuck in me like a blade set in the dirt. I could not bring myself to like him. I could see why men would sign with their blood. Wedding rumors came quick and cold. Road-clearing soldiers, seamstresses like shadows, clerks rubbing their hands over fresh rolls. They would press seals here, in a tavern called the place where the new order was decided. I moved along the wall with a tray. Red, yellow, brown waxes clustered there. Family seals rose like beast heads. Bothwell sat at the head, half armor off, gauntlets set aside. Nobles took sips and pressed seals, some with lips pressed, some with a smile too thin to be sincere. The scribe at the corner led the ritual. He pushed the hide, smoothed wax, set the stamp with a practiced flick. As he handled a jar of ink, his glove slipped at one joint, between thumb and index. For a heartbeat, I saw a V-shaped cut there, a darkened line with resin like a second skin. My pulse knocked. If hemp bites there, that cut is the name of the man who pulled the rope. He met my glance and did not hide the wound. Instead of fixing the glove, he lifted his cup and tipped his head as if inviting a secret audience. "Don't stand near the fire, servant. The smoke stings." His voice slid like a blade. The ring's rules whispered, "Two contrary words will be burned." They taught the public a phrase opposite to the truth of a strangling by hiring the fire. Bothwell's perfunctory trial played out as a tale already written. Witnesses busy, summons misplaced, judges unable to find proof. The accused walked free. Outside the courthouse the crowd roared, stones, shouts, a scatter of blows. I stood in the corridor like a pebble in a stream, hearing the judge's gavels fall like coffin nails. When Bothwell came out, someone catcalled a thin hemp loop onto the steps. It slithered like a small snake, and the crowd shuddered. Bothwell only smiled, looped the hemp into a tiny circle, and threaded it onto his dagger's pommel, making accusation into ornament. That moment I understood. He didn't merely kill with force. He swallowed other people's words whole. The wedding hit like a wall. Preparations filled the taverns. The scribes rehearsed marriage until it sounded like coin. Outside the gate, people screamed curses. In the antechamber, Mary stood before a mirror, the veil half set. She asked as if she already had the answer. "Do I still have a choice, Aidan?" I stayed silent. Names come last. The contract had been signed before the clock ticked. Yes, she told herself, not choosing is a choice. She pinned the veil. Each stitch felt like a history staple. In the chapel, candlelight traced the lace of the veil against the wall like a phantom. Bothwell took his place, face carved into solemnity. The priest intoned. The wine lifted. Hands met hands. When Bothwell slipped his ring onto Mary's finger, my own ring went cold, sudden and knife lean, like river stone in flood. Cold meant false. My whole body buzzed. I looked past him. The scribe, the bond writer, stood beside the altar, eyes not on the bride but on the marriage written on the roll. He hadn't come to witness love. He'd come to notarize a contract. The feast afterward was not merry. It was a ritual to pour blood into words. Nobles raised cups for the kingdom's stability, for the future. The four repeated until it became display. Mary sat, a thin smile practiced into place. Whenever her gaze slid to the window, I saw a woman at a crossroads whose lighthouse had been turned overnight. Bothwell occasionally touched the back of her hand like a nail driven into the plank of order. Night dropped. Guards changed at Dunbar. Sea air smelled of kelp and rust. I slipped through corridors and down to the scullery. Muir stood waiting, ink on his sleeve. He didn't ask. He opened a small jar under my nose. Resin, sharp and chosen. The exact scent of the night of the 10th. "They'll burn what we don't copy," he said, as if reading minutes into the wind. I told him about the V cut on the scribe's hand. He closed his eyes, then nodded. "His name is written there. But remember, names come last. Don't let a name kill the word." Upstairs, the corridors felt like an ear. I passed the room where the bond writer sat redoing hides. He tugged his glove off and rubbed his hand like a man showing off a tool. The V-cut showed, darker at the edges. I set down a tray. He didn't send me away. He regarded me like an audience chosen for the premiere. As I said, he said smoothly, "Right order. At Kirk O. Field, strangulation, then explosion. Today, sign first, then love. We always keep good order." He slid the glove back on, hiding the name. "Don't trust the fire," he added, as if giving trade advice. Fire cannot consume scent. It only teaches ears to believe. He pressed his seal into wax, a thud like a heart striking a new coffin. I left before my eyes betrayed my hands. In the chamber, Mary could not sleep. She sat leaned against the frame, the veil lying like shed skin beside her. "You still here?" she asked. "I am." She gave a tired, stubborn nod. "Do they make a woman marry a shadow instead of a man?" she asked. I said nothing. The ring at my finger felt warm. Neither consent nor refusal, but an inhale between two speeches. Outside the fort, the wind lashed stone. I unfolded the real Aidan slip and copied it down in my cipher. V-cut between thumb and finger, resin scent. Left ear birthmark, bond at Ainsley, sham trial, cold ring at the ceremony. I slipped the note inside the medallion and tucked it back into the crack behind the stair column. The fish swallowed its tail. The ring gave a short, hot pulse, the pen's period closing the sentence. To survive, I decided, sometimes you had to be your own courier across centuries. Near dawn, I walked the battlement. A small postern to the service yard stood half open, a torch guttered. Bothwell stood alone, no retinue, no colors, pouring himself a cup and drinking it slow. He didn't turn when he heard my step. He said, flat, as if speaking to wind, "You think I'm a devil." I said nothing. He continued, not harshly. "A country that fights and starves needs the simple thing, silence and strike. I will give it." He tilted the cup and let the last dregs run across the stone. "Stories? Let others tell them. I keep the ending." For the first time, he looked at me like a man looked at another man. Remember, Aiden, endings are written by the strong. Then he left, his cloak eating the wind like a bat. I leaned on the cold wall while dawn slit the sky. The word ending knocked in my chest like a pebble. Eastward, the first pale knife of sun broke. I knew chapter 3 closed here. The fox had married. The bloody hand had washed itself with wax and wine, and I, the crossed-out name, had seen the name carved in that V-cut. But I also knew his ending was provisional. When the sun climbed, people would gather and news would leak. The letters in the casket, should any survive, would change shade. When the Carberry banner rose, the rope would find new necks. I clenched the ring, warm as a promise, cold as a threat. Between the two temperatures lay my task, to drag the name into light, using the order by which words might survive. The sea wind turned. In the yard, a scrap of hemp rolled to my boot like a sentence unfinished. I picked it up and wound it once around my finger. It stung. I let it sting to remember the rasp of the 10th night. Then I turned back. The next chapter stood at the head of the passage where Muir waited with a scentless copy, and the bondwriter had scrubbed his hands but could not scrub the resin from the air. There I would begin to reorder the ending. There Bothwell would stop being only a fox that walks against the flame, because his scent was already stitched into the words. The noble council, the blood contract. The morning was limestone gray. People filed toward the tavern at Ainsley's Head, its wooden sign creaking in the rain. Inside, barrels lined the walls, and a long table ran the room's length, its leather top dark and worn. Everyone understood, the new order would be signed here. I carried a tray along the wall. Red, ochre, brown waxes waited in little piles. Family seals rose on the table like beast heads turning to stare. Bothwell sat at the head, half armor off, gauntlets set aside. Nobles came forward one by one to press their stamps, some with clenched jaws, some with thin smiles. Nobody was foolish enough to think a whiff of pine sap could wash blood away. I set a flagon before a fresh-faced youth whose wrist trembled like a taut bough. After the seal, he asked quietly, "If they burn these words one day, what then?" Bothwell lifted his eyes, then signed them again. Burned to ash, they still keep heat. The table laughed. I stepped back and watched the scribe in the corner. He wrote each house's name, slid the hide toward them, lifted the sealing wax, and set the stamp with sleight like a conjurer. When he pushed the inkstone back, his glove slipped just a fraction, and in that hair-thin moment, I saw a V-shaped cut between his thumb and forefinger. The spot Muir had warned me about. The skin there was darker, as if resin lingered in it. My pulse punched. He caught my look and did not hide his hand. Instead of fixing the glove, he raised his cup and tipped his head as if inviting a secret spectator. "Don't stand too close to the fire, servant. The smoke stings the eyes." The ring-law brushed my ear. 2 opposing words will be burned. Here, they were about to teach the public a phrase opposite the truth, using the hired fire of that night. Word of the trial spread fast. The hearing was swift as a pre-written tale. Witnesses busy, summons mislaid. Judges unable to find proof. The accused was freed. Outside the courthouse, the crowd was loud as hail. Shouts, banging the doors, stones thudding shields. I stood in the corridor and heard the hammered gavel fall like a lid on a coffin. When Bothwell emerged, someone tossed a thin hemp loop onto the steps. It uncoiled like a small snake, harmless and spine-chilling. Bothwell laughed, looped the hemp into a tiny ring, and threaded it onto his dagger's pommel, turning accusation into ornament. In that instant I understood. He didn't just take lives, he swallowed other people's words. The wedding arrived like a wall. Road clearers, seamstresses slipping through streets like shadows, clerks testing their nibs so the word marriage would roll smooth as a coin. People crowded at the gates, voices hoarse, curses flying like paper arrows. In the preparation room, Mary stood before a mirror. The white veil lay soft in her hands, and her skin was the pallor of sleeplessness. She set her palm on her waist and let it fall, as if she might pluck a thread that bound an unseen puppet. "Do I still have a choice, Aiden?" she asked. No answer required. I stayed silent. Names come last, and today's choice had already been arranged by bonds signed the night before. Yes, she told herself, not choosing is a choice. She pinned the veil. The pinning sounded, to me, like a sentence being nailed into place. In the chapel, Candlelight cast the veil's shadow across the walls like a stage ghost. Bothwell moved forward, his face hardened into ritual. The priest intoned, wine was lifted, hands were placed together. When Bothwell slipped his ring onto Mary's finger, my own ring went suddenly cold, stone cold like a river's bank in flood. Cold meant wrong. My limbs prickled. I looked past him. The bond scribe stood beside the altar, not watching the bride, but reading the word marriage on the roll. He had not come to witness love. He had come to notarize a contract. The feast afterward was not celebration. It was the ritual of pouring blood into words. Goblets rose, for the kingdom's stability, for the future, for the end of chaos. The word for repeated until it turned to decor. Mary sat at the far end, a practiced thin smile at her lips. Whenever her gaze slid to the window, I saw a woman stranded at a crossroads whose lighthouse had been turned overnight. Bothwell would reach across and press the back of her hand. Another nail hammered into the plank called order. Night fell. Dunbar's guards changed. Sea wind carried salt and rot. I slipped down to the scullery. Muir was waiting, ink staining his sleeve. He didn't ask questions. He unscrewed a small jar and held it under my nose. Resin, exact, chosen, the very smell of the 10th night. They'll burn what we don't copy, he said as if reading minutes into the wind. I told him about the V cut. He blinked once and nodded. His name is carved there. But remember, names come last. Don't let a name kill the word. Upstairs the corridor was an ear. I passed the room where the bond writer sat reworking hides. He peeled off a glove and rubbed his hand. The V cut showed in dark contrast. I set a tray down. He didn't brush me away. He looked at me like a director policing his front row. I told you, he said, voice as smooth as a blade. Right order. At Kirk O'Field, strangulation before explosion. Today, sign before love. We always keep our order. He slid the glove back on, hiding his name. Don't trust the fire, he added, as if offering trade advice. Fire cannot consume scent, only ears into believing. He struck his seal into wax, a dull thud like a heart dropping into a newly made chest. I left before my eyes could betray my hands. Mary could not sleep. The veil lay like shed skin on a chair. You still here? She asked. I am, I answered. She nodded, stubborn under exhaustion. Do they make a woman marry a shadow and not a man? She asked. I had no answer. The ring warmed slightly, breath between two sentences. Outside the fortress, rain whipped the stone. I took out the real Aiden's scrap and copied it into my cipher. V-cut, resin scent. Left ear birthmark. Bond at Ainsley. Sham trial. Cold ring at ceremony. I tucked the note into the medallion and pressed it back into the crack behind the stair column. One courier leaving a message for another age. The ring pulsed, a short hot beat. The circle closed. To survive, sometimes you must be your own messenger across centuries. Near dawn, I walked the battlement. A postern to the service yard stood ajar, torches guttered. Bothwell stood alone, no retinue, no banners, pouring a cup and drinking slow. He didn't turn when he heard me. You think I'm a devil, he said flatly. I said nothing. He went on, not harsh, just bone cold. A nation that fights and starves needs something simple, silence and the strike. I will give them that. He tipped the cup and let the last wine run over the stone. Stories? Let others tell them. I'll keep the ending. Then, for the first time, he looked at me as at a man. Remember, Aiden, endings are written by the strong. He left, cloak snapping the wind like a batwing. I leaned against cold stone. The word ending struck in my chest like pebble against glass. Dawn cut the eastern sky. This chapter closes here. The fox had married. The bloody hand washed itself with wax and wine. And I, the crossed-out name, had seen a name carved in that V. But his ending was provisional. When the sun rose, people would gather. News would leak. The letters in the casket, if they survived, might shift shade. When the Carberry banner rose, hemp would find other necks. I clenched the ring, warm as a promise, cold as a threat. Between those two temperatures, I knew the work left me. To drag the name into light, in the proper order, so the words can survive. The sea wind shifted. A scrap of hemp rolled to my boot like an unfinished sentence. I picked it up and wound it once around my finger. The sting was honest. I let it bite, so I would remember the rasp of that 10th night. Then I turned back. The next chapter waited at the head of the passage where Muir held an unscented copy, and the bondwriter had scrubbed his hands, but could not scrub resin from the air. There I would begin to reorder the ending. There Bothwell would stop being only a fox that walks against the flame, because his scent had already been stitched into the words. Dawn rose thin as ash. I hid the hemp in my lining, crossed the damp yard, and found Muir on the cold step. He didn't greet me. He set a thin bundle of hide into my hands like a surgeon passing a knife. "Ainsley has signed," he said, eyes on the stone. "Now letters. If they leak, the words will speak for mouths." I knew he meant the casket. Things in my future I'd seen only blurred in pictures and argument. We went down to a low, narrow room. The smell of cold ink and unscented wax mixed into something metallic. 3 scrolls lay sealed, each stamped with a broken arrow mark. Muir snuffed one lamp until only 2 flames remained. Enough for the letters to show, but not the faces to be bright. "Read," he said. I broke the first seal. The handwriting was not Mary's, sharp, spare, occasionally biting the margin as if written while breathing hard. I cannot stand him. His breath makes me nauseous. But if this frees you. The next line blurred. Ink run. I hesitated. Letters like this were political tinder. One line could set the country alight. But letters could be stitched. Don't trust the fire. I reminded myself and read the second scroll. Midway it struck like iron flakes. Every covenant is stained with blood. I looked at Muir. He nodded. Barely. The line matched a notch in the feast table. If this was planted handwriting, the planter had learned to speak wood as well as paper. The third bundle was brief. Day, place, and a knot-like sigil. At the edge a thin scent of resin threaded like hair. I closed my eyes. Scent is a fire that does not burn. The same hand touched all of these, I said. The bondwriter set his fingers here. Then scent is on our side, Muir said, and passed me a small packet. Take this to St. Giles. Father Moray will copy. The North Passage is watched. Go by the rain roads. Rain roads? He pushed through a narrow cupboard door that opened on to a run of eaves and drains. Go by water noise. Guards hate wet. Words like cold. I wrapped the packet under my arm and crept over the mossy roofs. Rain smacked down like silver cords, stinging the cheek and waking the head. At the third sewer arch a hooded figure leaned in shadow. He did not speak. He lifted a hand. His glove was dry and stiff. I looked for the V-cut. None. He slipped a tiny mother-of-pearl pin into my palm. If detained, he murmured, say the Queen erred. I slid the pin into my sleeve. We passed like 2 rain lines. At St. Giles, Father Moray waited before a sheet of taut hide. He did not open the letters at once. He lit a short wick and cupped the smoke in a small brass bowl, smoke from unscented resin. If the paper's scent has changed, we know another hand has touched it. I handed him the bundles. Moray inhaled slow. Touched, but not altered. Good. He motioned a copyist. Make 2 transcripts. One under the eye door, one northbound. I told him about the V-cut. Moray fell quiet for a moment. The name forms, he said. But remember, name comes after the word. He laid down his pen and asked, are you going back to Dunbar? Tonight, I said. Then hear me, he said. Don't only ask who killed. Ask who needs that killing written to live. Bothwell needs the word order. The nobles need the word pardon. The bondmaker needs his anonymity. Mary, he paused, needs a way home. I folded the copy and hid it in my cloak. A back door banged open. The steward walked in, 2 guards behind him, smiling too thin. Father, the record needs the church's cooperation. Moray answered calmly. The church cooperates with words. Good, the steward said, eyes flicking to the empty packet on the table. I will take the transcript to the council. You will take your copy, Moray corrected. The 2 men regarded each other, polite as 2 silk knives. I bowed and melted into the column's shadow. Outside, Edinburgh hummed like a hive. Rumors of Carberry rose. Some lairds would not suffer the fox forever. Banners might be planted on the hill. On a narrow slope the bondwriter stepped out to block me. He smiled a thin string of a smile. The rain roads suit you. And the fire roads? I asked. He eased his glove back a fraction, and for one sharp flash the V-cut showed. A name is only a mark, Aiden, he said low. The ending is life. Don't mistake order. He slid past with resin in his wake. I understood why he survived the knives. He knew on which side of the word to stand. That night at Dunbar, the fortress breathed slow. Mary sat by the window, her shadow lengthening up the wall like a double. "Did you get to St. Giles?" she asked without looking at me. "I did. And what do the words say?" I hesitated. Words can free or burn. "They say, there is a way home, if the ending changes." She turned, and in her eyes a dim star winked and died slowly. "Carberry," she whispered as if naming it might rouse it. "I will go then." "With whom?" I asked. She did not answer fully. When she did, it was as if giving a thing too fragile to be written. "With someone who needs no hemp to survive." Night tightened. In the yard I found Bothwell fitting a saddle. He looked at me, not with hatred, but with the exhausted look of someone who knows the wind shifts. "If the banners go up on the hill," he said, "I will ride. Alone." The word is simple: strike. He shoved something into my palm, a short dagger. "For the Queen. Not to kill, to cut, when the rope comes." The steel was cold and indifferent in my hand. I moved down the hall to the cloakroom. The bondrider was there, waiting like a smudge of ink not yet dry. He pointed at a gray cloak hanging among the others. "Tomorrow, when Carberry's banner rises, go to the man who wears that cloak. He will carry the word that changes an ending." "Why help me?" I asked. "Because endings are set by the strong," he repeated Bothwell's line. "And strong men rewrite." The last night before Carberry fell like slow ink. I tucked the transcript into my medallion, hid the dagger, fixed the mother-of-pearl pin, touched the ring, warm as the pilgrim's stone that keeps heat. From the yard came hammer clangs. They were reinforcing wheels. From the tower came the counting of names, the muster. Between those beats I heard another rhythm: hour, order, hands, rope, scent, fire, after, before, and finally, name. I sat on the step and wrote in the dry ink Moray had given me. Left ear birthmark, V-cut, resin, Ainsley bond, sham trial, cold ring at the ceremony, Carberry banner, gray cloak, word to change the ending. I folded it, slid it into the medallion, and pressed it into the second crack. The ring pulsed once, then stilled like a pond after a pebble. East, Carberry Hill was a shadow, but the words had drawn me there like invisible cord. Tomorrow hemp would seek other necks. Tomorrow the fox would try to fix the ending again. And tomorrow, among the flags, I would need to point to the right man in the gray cloak, the one carrying that word sharp enough to change an ending. I gripped the dagger. The steel was mute. The ring spoke instead. "Don't trust the fire. Trust the order." Then the name. Then the ending. A wedding in the dark. The wedding came faster than anyone imagined. Edinburgh had barely cooled from its rage over Darnley's death when the news spread. Mary would marry Bothwell. No one dared speak open protest, but the faces in the streets were mute spears. Moving through the crowd as Aidan, I saw fists clench, faces flush, curses swallowed back for fear of soldiers' blades. The ceremony unfolded inside Holyrood Chapel. No bells, no flowers, only guards with hands on their hilts. The air was thick with resin. Candles lined the aisle, dripping wax that looked like clotted blood. Bothwell entered first in a black cloak, fur at his shoulders, eyes blazing like a hunter who had just snared his prey. Mary followed in white, but her face was ash, her eyes no longer a queen's light, but the shadow of someone compelled. I stood among the servants, heart hammering. In my head echoed the line I'd read in 2025. On May 15th, 1567, Mary, Queen of Scots, married James Hepburn, Earl of Bothwell, in a somber ceremony with no cheers. Seeing it with my own eyes, I understood this wasn't a wedding. It was a disguised funeral, burying not only Darnley but the honor of a nation. The priest's voice rasped and shook. Bothwell set a hand to his sword and made his vow loud and proud. Mary answered so softly I, standing close, could barely hear, yet still enough to be written down. "I consent." A whisper spread through the chapel. "The Queen consents." The words weighed like lead. Consent or coercion? Who would remember the difference? History records signatures, not ropes and tears. Then the story swerved. When Bothwell reached to take Mary's hand at the altar, a noise cracked from the back. The wooden doors burst open. A man stepped in, cloak soaked, face pale. In his hand, a sheet of paper raised high. "I object," his voice echoed, freezing the chapel. Bothwell's hand snapped to his sword. Guards surged. But the man shouted again, brandishing the paper. "This is proof. This is the bond. You signed to kill Darnley. Not fire, rope. Your names are all here." A hiss of whispers erupted. Nobles blanched. A few stood, daggers half drawn. I recognized the paper. A copy of the bond I'd seen at the council, but with handwritten notes describing how Darnley was killed. The rope, the birthmark on the strangler's left ear. Ice ran through me. Someone had copied the truth and hurled it into the wedding. Mary froze, eyes wide, staring at the paper as if at a sudden exit. Bothwell roared and lunged to seize it, but the man hurled it toward the altar. The sheet spun through candlelight and landed at the feet of a saint's statue. Silence stretched like a blade. Then chaos burst. Guards swarmed the intruder. Bothwell shouted to burn the paper at once. Nobles yelled, some rushing to cover their seals, terrified of exposure. Mary stepped down a pace, gaze locked on the paper, lips moving but no sound. I moved without thinking, forcing through the crowd. My ring burned, as if guiding me. I stooped, hands trembling, and lifted the sheet. Words glared back at me. Not fire. Not accident. Their own hands tightened the rope. I looked up, straight into Bothwell's eyes. Gone was the fox's cunning. There was only a predator who'd just had its prey ripped from its jaws. He drew his sword, steel flashing in the chapel light. Screams ricocheted. Wine and wax spilled, running like blood. I clutched the paper to my chest, heartbeat frantic. Tonight was not just a wedding in darkness. It was a manhunt in God's house. Swords hissed free, metal glinting under candles. I clenched the paper so hard my fingers bled. The air was thick with wax smoke, spilt wine, and fresh blood. The smell of a wedding turned hunt. Bothwell lunged. He was no longer a sly fox, but a wild beast. His blade cut the air. I dove aside, crashing into the wooden steps. Guards grabbed the protester. Others came for me. Mary's voice cracked across the chapel like a shattered bell. Enough. This is God's house. Will you make it a gallows? But no one stopped. Nobles covered their faces. Some fled, terrified their names were on that page. Footsteps hammered, shouts clashed. I staggered up, hugging the paper, eyes fixed on the side door. My ring burned like coal, trembling as if urging me out. I lunged for the door, but an iron grip snatched my cloak, yanking me back. I fell, skull cracking on stone, vision blurring. The man holding me wore leather gloves. At his left ear, a dark birthmark. He pinned me, his breath reeking of hide and smoke. "Give it," he snarled, fingers tightening on my throat, nails biting skin. "The paper isn't yours." I gasped, choking. In that strangled moment, a flash struck me. Kirk O'Field, this very hand crushing Darnley's windpipe. I heard again the harsh rasp of the rope. Past and present overlapped. Fear twisted into fury. I bit his wrist. He hissed and loosened for a heartbeat. I rolled, crawling between benches, paper still slick in my palm. I bolted for the side door. It flung open. Night wind slammed in like a lifeline. I stumbled out, tripped down wet steps into grass. Behind me, Bothwell's roar echoed. "Catch him, at all costs." Hooves thundered in the courtyard, torches flared. I sprang up and ran, lungs on fire. The ring's heat pointed me toward the shadow of the walls. Glancing back, I saw the chapel still lit, guards spilling out like hounds. And in the doorway, Mary stood gripping the bars, eyes on me. Her gaze no longer held despair, but a strange spark. Hope, fragile and bright. She didn't shout or order. She only nodded once, as if saying, "Keep it alive." I ran harder. Soldiers' cries closed in. The cobbles were slick. I fell, knees tearing, but didn't stop. Each time I faltered, the ring flared, reminding me I wasn't allowed to die yet. I still owed history its record. I ducked into an alley. Darkness swallowed me. Hooves clattered past. Only my heartbeat pounded in my ears. I slid down a wall, paper pressed to my chest, edge torn, ink smeared with sweat and blood. But the line remained. Not fire. Not accident. Their own hands tightened the rope. I laughed once, cracked and breathless. In a city where an entire court conspired to bury truth. In a wedding turned death sentence. I was clutching the one proof that could flip the story. The triumph lasted a heartbeat. I knew this proof was my passport to life and my ticket to death. Whoever held it would be hunted. And now I, the man out of a century, was the carrier. I tilted my head to the gray sky, breath smoking. I saw clearly. Tonight's wedding didn't end in wine and music, but in a chase between truth's light and power's shadow. In this game, I could no longer step out of. I tore through Edinburgh's rain-slick lanes, soldiers' boots and horses hemming me like iron nets. The paper in my hand was crumpled, ink blurred, but its words cut like scars into my skin. Not fire, not accident. Their own hands tightened the rope. I pressed it to my chest. It burned under my shirt like a live coal, evidence and death warrant in one. A dog barked in a blind alley, footsteps converging from two sides. I slipped through a half-open wooden door, tumbling down into a wine cellar. Sour air rose, rot, wood, and rust. I pressed back against stone, holding my breath, hearing guards shout above, boots clatter, steel clink. One paused, banged the door with a spear, then moved on. When silence stretched, I exhaled, a shudder like a man waking from a hanging dream. In the dark, the ring warmed, a strange comfort and a warning, you're not done. I unrolled the paper in the flicker of an abandoned oil lamp. One corner soaked, ink running gray-green, but the core survived. With trembling hands, I copied a few lines in my private code on the inside of my cloak. Insurance if the original was seized. My fingers bled from scraping stone. The red smeared on the paper like an involuntary seal. I froze at the thought. If history found this page, would they call it traitor's blood or witness's blood? The cellar door creaked. A small, ink-stained figure descended. I tensed, hand to my dagger, then saw Muir, the middle-aged servant. He studied me, not scolding, not praising, only measuring how long I might last. He held out a dry cloth. Wipe it, Aiden. Paper won't survive sweat and blood. I took it, hands shaking. He sat on a barrel, sighed. You've done what no one dared. But remember, every piece of evidence breeds another man who wants to erase it. His eyes glinted in the dark. Tonight you're no longer a servant. You're the bearer of words. And the bearer is hunted. I clutched the paper. His words tolled like a funeral bell for me. Outside, hooves pounded again. The night watch beat a long roll. Edinburgh was awake. And when the city rose, I would be prey. I whispered, if I die, will you keep it? He shook his head. No, I will only copy. Words keep themselves. People don't. Then he left me with the wind slipping through cracks like a far-off whisper. I knew, when dawn came, the hunt would start. And I, Aiden, the name history crossed out, had stepped squarely into the sights of those who rewrite the past with blood. The night hunt. I left the wine cellar when the watch drum struck the third hour. The rain had eased, but Edinburgh still felt soaked through. Slick cobbles reflected the lonely torchlight. I pulled my hood down and pressed the paper to my chest like a foundling. My footsteps echoed in the alleys, and every time I glanced back, I only saw a blotchy shadow. But instinct kept whispering, you are not alone. The street toward the north gate smelled of ash and pine resin, the scent left by the passing patrol. I slipped into a narrow nook and touched a dry hand thrust from a wall niche. A beggar, hair like straw, whispered, run, servant. The night hunts the bearer of the words. He went limp, eyes rolling white. Before I could understand, boot beats hammered from the end of the lane and metal clinked. I tore back out and ran. Wind lashed my face, ears ringing. Torches exploded behind me. Cloaks of black fanned out like a pack. A shout hit the walls. Seize him. Bothwell's men. I tore past the old market. Tables overturned from the afternoon scuffle, slicing my palm on a splintered board where a dagger had been driven. I stumbled. The paper almost slipped free. The ring clenched, hot, urgent, and jerked me back upright. Lightning split the sky. In that flash I saw them. 3 gloved men posted to block the lanes. One had the dark birthmark at his left ear. He stared, a blade smile slick across his face, and raised his hand to loose the hunting dogs. My stomach dropped. That was the hand that had strangled Darnley. Now it waited to find mine. I ran for Greyfriars. Tombstones jutted like wolf teeth beneath the lightning. I darted between graves, breath ice in my lungs. The terrain slowed the soldiers, but the hounds had scent. Their baying drove at my neck. I pressed myself behind a toppled stone, clutching the sodden paper. The ring burned, not to guide me, but to warn. Chains rasped, heavy breathing closed in. A black hound leapt. I flashed the small dagger Bothwell had given me and cut at its muzzle. Its howl split the yard. Footsteps thundered nearer. I bolted out the back path, heart a drum. Rows of graves and wingless angels watched my passage like mute jurors. Behind me the cry rose louder. He has the paper. Don't let him escape. It hit me. This hunt was broader than Bothwell. Everyone who had laid wax to hide wished the sheet buried, along with me. I rolled over a low brick wall and flattened on the grass. Ahead, the slope up to Carberry, where villagers whispered flags would be raised, stretched empty. Before I could climb, a shadow blocked the path. The bond rider stood there, rein running into the V-cut at his finger. He didn't rush. He stood with hands hidden, voice low, measured like a death knell. "You run fast, Aiden," he said, "but words don't outpace the rope." I took a step back, dagger clenched. He didn't lunge. He walked slow, each footfall a funeral drum. Hand over the sheet. "You'll die quietly. Keep it, and the dogs will circle your neck." My fingers tightened on the paper until they went numb. The ring chilled, then flared hot. Again and again, 2 heartbeats at war. History was forcing me to choose. Hooves approached from behind. The rider waited, the night thick around us, and I, an anachronism, felt the hunt beginning inside my own blood. Rain stitched down my hair. He stood patient, a nightmare that spoke in courtesy. "Hand it over," he repeated, his certainty shaped by many practiced crimes. My arms went numb. The dagger weighed like a stone, but a choice is not made for you. You must step back or stand. A cry, distant, then nearer, cut through. A woman in a gray cloak stepped out from between 2 bushes and walked straight toward us. She did not hurry. The cold she carried was not simply weather. It was the kind of cold that belongs to someone who has passed many sleepless nights. "Stand down," she said, not as a command, but as an offer you could not refuse. The bond rider faltered, perplexed as if his poem had acquired a question mark. She held out a bare hand. No sword, no signal, and in it lay a tiny mother-of-pearl pin like the one Mary had given me. I had no time to think. The woman faced the rider and said, "You have hidden enough. Tonight, if your hand moves, no one will cover you." He stepped back, not because he feared for the paper, but because a mirror had been held to his shame. A shout rang behind us. "Aiden, where?" The voice of a Bothwell man. The gray cloak smiled like someone telling an old tale. "Go," she said to me. "We have another matter." Then she slipped into the dark, water swallowing her shape. I stood frozen as the rider blinked, hands unsteady. There was no time to brood. I slipped past him and sprinted up Carberry. Hooves pounded louder. The shouts closed. I ran like a man unshackled, as if each step might be my last. The paper thudded wet against my chest. Ink bled into a halo. The ring heated in long pulses, urging me onward. How far could I run? Not far enough. Someone must stop me. Someone must steal that sheet. Someone wanted their name to remain unread. Night hides many things, but not smells. Resin, leather, ink, and a new iron tang. The scent of blood near. I vaulted a ditch, slid across a slick patch, and fell. On rising, a dark figure blocked me. No gloves, only a soaked leather coat. I recognized him. A Bothwell soldier I'd seen at the signing, but his eyes flickered like a man not as hard as the rest. "You have paper," he said with hesitation. "Give it, and I'll let you go." I saw the fissure in his words, an almost apology. I feinted left, tossed the paper as if to the ground, then threw the dagger to my right and vaulted. He lunged, grabbed. There was a muffled stammer, and in the confusion I plowed over him and ran. The dagger clattered free. He screamed, but soldiers called him away. I gripped the sheet, trembling all the way. I ducked into an abandoned tannery courtyard. Empty racks, ropes swinging like fishing hooks. I crouched behind a barrel and read the page again. A strip had been torn away, a corner blackened, but the center, the heart of it, remained. The phrase repeated like a drumbeat in my skull. Not fire. Not accident. Their own hands tightened the rope. I did not speak it aloud. I read it like a prayer, trying to pin it inside me. Footsteps closed in. I melted deeper into shadow, a rat in history's web, every path a snare. Yet a thought came cold and bright. Moray and St. Giles still existed. Moray had said, "Don't let the name kill the word." I remembered the mother-of-pearl pin Mary had given me. "If you're stopped, say the Queen erred." I improvised. I fished the pin from inside my cloak and slipped the paper beneath it, pricking the lining so the pin would sit like a secret latch. If anyone grabbed me hard, the pin might flash, a small signal. My plan was crude but serviceable. Tuck the paper into the medallion and bury the medallion where only one person would know. I unpinned the brooch, folded the sleeve, lodged the sheet inside the hollow, and slid the brooch back under my shirt. My breathing steadied a fraction. A distant clunked alarm, wheels rolling, not gunshots, told me patrols were sealing crossings. My straight route was cut. I had to work through market lanes, past shuttered hydros, and late bell tolling. A moan at my side. Under an evil woman lay curled, rags clinging, eyes wide. I knelt, pressed something from my pouch into her hand. She smiled crookedly and whispered, "Thank you, Aiden." The name struck like a blade. Somebody had called me by the borrowed name tonight. I looked back, but saw no face. She gripped my hand and said, "Take it, and don't let them take the word." I walked on, knuckling the shock along the way. Horses neared. Time ran thin. St. Giles, Father Moray, where the words burned slow and hard, rose in my mind like a refuge. I cut through a locked back gate into the leather market, and there, leaning against a stone, the gray cloak waited as if for me. She nodded. That was the sign. Follow. We moved without speech. In the dark, I registered her familiarity. Posture, the way she tucking her hair, the measured step. She seemed less like Mary and more like a woman tied to the line of men who keep the words, the faction of ink and binding that answered to Moray. We slipped through alleys, crept under a low lintel, and climbed a short wall to a rear door of St. Giles. The church door was heavy, but Moray stood waiting, hood soaked, tired, eyes bright. A handful of black-robed copyists and a leather worker formed a ring behind him, faces alert and spare. "You come at an odd hour," Moray said, voice like a stone rolling. But I heard boots. I sank down and set the medallion in his hands. He touched the pearl pin and nodded. "Good. Any marks?" "Yes." I told him everything. The bond writer, the V-cut, the gray cloak, the cries. He did not look surprised. He placed the paper gently on the table, took a small knife, and sealed the ragged edges ink with a trick of wax to stop its bleeding. Then, to a copyist, "Make 2 transcripts. One for the northern vault, one for the congregation. Seal it with the unbranded seal." The scribe bowed and began as if to music. For the first time in hours, I inhaled properly. The ring cooled like a child settling. Moray's hand on my shoulder carried gravity. "This night is the overture. They will hunt. You, child, must be ready." He spoke like teaching a child to stand in a storm. Words need more than paper. They need people to hide them, people to run with them, people to die for them. "Can you do it?" His question was not an inquiry, but an imperative. I nodded. Outside, hunting horns still called. In the small, echoing room, copies were transcribed, wax sealed, the unbranded stamp pressed like an O over a mouth. I watched as they boxed the original. Muir appeared with a small satchel of dry ink and seized the medallion. He set it in a wooden chest, wrapped it in cords and many seals. "To the northern vault," he ordered. "Lock the door. Block the passage. Let no one know this place but us." A scribe complied, and the paper slid into the vault, and the sound of the lock closed like a final word. Warmth flowed through me, less because the page was hidden than because it was preserved. The word would live, even if not yet given to history. The cries of the hunt still echoed beyond the door. Moray handed me a small phial. "Drink. This keeps the fury from waking." Bitter as medicine, the draught warmed me slow. He looked straight at me, like an arrow. "You have chosen a route with no turning back. You bore the name erased by history. Keep the word, and I will teach you how to keep a word alive beyond smoke and ash." That night, St. Giles glowed like a small hearth in the city. Down in the vault, the copies were made, waxed, stamped. The room's rhythm was the steady pulse of a thing larger than us. The original lay in a box, breathing like a living thing. I thought of Mary, Bothwell, the bond writer with the V-scar and the gray cloak, and wondered how to put that name on a page without becoming a cross-out. The answer did not come at once, but I realized one thing. I was no longer alone in flight. In the dark, there were people who would hide words for me. People who would keep the medallion secret. People who, if needed, would offer their lives to keep the words longer lived than themselves. That was the beginning of a different hunt, not to kill men, but to hunt for the word that would rescue history. Confession in the crypt. Morning mist lay over the city like a thin shroud. The sun was a dull coin, but the streets were already stirring. I woke in a shadowed corner of St. Giles, where the stone kept the warmth of centuries. On the table, duplicates lay rolled and sealed, unbranded wax stamped down like coffin lids. They waited, word ships ready to sail, beside the wrapped original, breathing faintly as if it were alive. Wax, ink, damp timber, I could taste them. Moray had parceled out the work like a campaign. Scribes, runners, custodians, mythmakers. My assignment was outside, not to broadcast, but to harvest fragments, the scraps that let words draw a map. He rested a hand on my shoulder longer than he had to. Remember, he said, confession rarely comes from the culprit's mouth. Sometimes it falls out of small things, wax, a cut, a pin. I nodded, the ring still warming and cooling in slow, private pulses. Beneath the metal, a line of dried blood looked like a clumsy signature. I realized, uselessly, how much I wanted to give the real Aidan his name back. By first bell, Holyrood's chaos had spread like surf. Gates jammed, crowds clustered. Bothwell raged, ordered a dragnet for the disturber. Lists made, shadows chased, blood demanded. The machine of power began to grind, ready to crush whatever stones lay on the rails. Our pages were kindling in a wet furnace. Whoever kept them kept the fire. Then an invitation arrived without a mouth, just an eye. A scrap slid under our door, hand shaky, familiar, Greyfriars Crypt. Between the angels. 1 hour. No signature. A summons or a snare, but not from Bothwell, not from the bondwriter. This smelled of the people who protect words, not the ones who burn them. Greyfriars breathed cold when I arrived. The graveyard was quieter than wind. Old stones tilted like sentences that never found a period. Between two stone angels, a family vault gaped a palm's width. I reached into the crevice. A damp note fell into my hand. Do not fear to come closer. I did not come to kill. Beside it, a smear of wax. No crest, no clan, scented more of old earth than resin. Footsteps. A gray cloak stepped down into the tomb as if returning to a room she rented by the season. Same woman as Carberry's night. She kept her hood up. Her hair held the dew. You're on time, she said, still that tone that isn't a command and yet can't be refused. Who are you? I asked, not out of curiosity, but because names are anchors. She smiled thin. My name doesn't matter. I work in lines, not letters. You make a route if you want words to run. People like us don't require names to exist. That sentence reminded me of the real Aidan. Nobody, until the words needed a body. She sat on a stone chest and unwrapped a smaller packet. I have something for you, she said. Not what a crowd likes. Not proof for a courtroom. A confession. The word rattled in the air. A confession? Here? She unfolded the slip. It wasn't policy. It was a list. Names, dates, corners, and at the bottom, a jagged line written by a trembling hand. I held the rope. I watched them tighten. I bear the V. I went still. Those words breathed like someone speaking from under a floorboard. The bondwriter wanted relief, but not at a scaffold. The gray cloak watched me, needles in her eyes. The writer wants to die without being howled at. He left a line for someone who can read. I touched the skittering ink, the cracked leather. It felt like laying a hand on an old life. Who wrote it? Not one, she said. A chain, servant, soldier, clerk, glove man. They all wrote, some in blood, some in ink. Truth here is a net, not a beam. No hand alone holds the rope. Then she cut sideways. One of them will speak tonight. St. N's old crypt. She waited, let it land. He isn't coming to explain. He's coming to clear himself the only way he can, by making death mean something. Why tell me? Because you carry the words, she said. People trust words more than the people who carry them. He'll want to see that the words survive him. A gentle knock. Muir slid into the chamber, face gray, eyes deeper than his scars. He rested a hand on my arm. Go, he said. Listen to the gray cloak. But remember, confessions don't scrub the floor. They just pull back a rug. We still choose what to reveal and what to hide. I heard Darnley's voice from the bed. If I die, write it true. Debt due. St. N's lay hidden off the old quarter. where tailors and copyists kept low fires. The door sagged, wax breathed. A man sat against the wall, head bowed, clothes wet through, face pale, his fingers clutched a paper. I knew him. Eldon, the locksmith, a middleman who'd sealed more documents than he'd read. He looked up, silvered eyes, sandpaper voice. "I've come to confess." Moray stepped forward, silent. Eldon read in short strokes, then stared straight at me. I saw the hand tighten. I saw the V. I sealed for them. I know who received the wax that night. The words rolled like a boulder down a gorge. Then the turn. Eldon pointed to a barrel of dried hemp rope. "I kept a piece," he said. I confess I handed the coil to him. Not for money. Under threat. He broke. Raw. Rasping. "Name." He shook his head. "I'll say this. Birthmark on the left ear." His hand felt nothing. His eyes looked like a sleeper. Moray kept silence. The gray cloak covered Eldon's eyes with her palm. "More," she said. He whispered a name. Not Bothwell. Not the bond writer. A court-adjacent noble, the so-called civil right hand of the crown. A man who wrote conclusions for the realm. Hearing it chilled me in a way Bothwell never had. A system spoke through Eldon's teeth. Desire wasn't the engine, advantage was. Everyone was a link. Eldon drew a small rag from his coat. Fibers clung to it. Hemp burn, faint resin. He placed it in Moray's hand. "Keep it," he said. "Use it if needed." Moray didn't take it at once. He studied Eldon like a rare object. "Do you want to be redeemed?" Eldon shook. "I don't have redemption. I only want children in the market not to throw stones at my name." The room held its breath. Then Eldon jerked, as if a wire tightened. "There's another," he gasped, pointing toward a shadow. "She knows." He meant the gray cloak. She didn't blink. "I know because I watched," she said. "I keep words, but I also read faces. He'll come, one who calls himself loyal. Let him talk. If he dares, we will take his words and trap him in them." What followed was organized tumult. Eldon's statement fixed, sealed, duplicated. Scribes scratching, wax pooling, copy stamping. I watched the gray cloak, a trace smile, small as a nick in a tabletop, as if she'd just set a splinter to smolder. Eldon turned to me, voice thin. "You carry the words. I'd rather be despised than watch the words be drowned." In his eyes I saw relief, not triumph. Confession frees some, it ruins others. It braided me into both. When we paused for breath, Moray tugged me aside. "Good," he said, no praise in his tone, just gravity. "But the road runs long. They'll track the V, they'll follow the rope. They'll come to St. Anne's and ask who holds the page." He glanced at the stone, at its drill holes like vents in a carriage. "We'll use the network. Covers, swaps, feigned deaths. But you must change your name more than once. To keep words alive, you can't always be Aiden." He pressed a small square of cloth into my hand, the silversmith's mark stitched in thread. "Wear it. It opens doors. And remember, paper doesn't fear fire if we make it not burn." I left St. Anne's with the original locked away. Confession had bloomed, not set. We'd glimpsed a few muscles of the beast, its body still crouched in the dark. Among the word keepers I felt a new order, some wrist with speech, some with blood, and some, gray cloak, wrist with timing. Who would pay? Who would live? Who would be copied wrong, forever? One thing was clear, from now on, every confession would be weighed. And I, the ring bearer, the word bearer, would need to learn which truths could stand in the wind of power and which were merely the last breath of a guilty man. The crypt chilled as if winter had opened a door. A candle puckered and died. Smoke crawled low like a snake. A sharp scent threaded the air. Not church wax, not Moray's resin. The harsher resin that clung to the gloves from Kirk O'Field. Moray cocked his head, eyes gone dark. "They're here," he breathed. "Dry, even footfalls." The bond rider appeared at the stairhead like a bone exclamation mark. He hadn't brought many. 2 men with cranked crossbows hovered behind. He doffed his hat, birthmark bared, and smiled the apology of a man late to supper. "I didn't come to burn words," he said. "I came to swap them." He held up a sheet. The hand shook like a drunk's. Eldon's confession. He hanged himself from guilt. He placed the new page beside Moray's, hoping the voices would bleed together. Resin hit my face. I studied the ink's edge, his bled violet in smoke. Cooked ink, Moray would call it. Eldon's true lines browned in cold air, no purple sheen. A hair-thin difference, enough to save a neck. Eldon couldn't tie a hangman's knot, the gray cloak said, voice flat. He sold locks all his life. He wouldn't choose the executioner's noose. And your forgery is right-handed. Eldon writes left. The bondrider's eyes narrowed, as if noticing a fresh nick in his own finger. You always arrive on time, he murmured. On time is how you live long, she said. Muir tapped the wooden chest. 2 quick clicks. 2 scribes peeled off with copies, slid into the north passage. Moray shelved the original, pressed a bead of unscented wax. Cock, a dry lock. You can't swap this, he said to the room more than the man. In here, the smell is on our side. The bondrider shrugged. Smell is a parlor trick. His hand lifted. The crossbows came up. Thunk. Eldon slammed back, a bolt in his shoulder. Not deep, but enough to nail him to the wall. He grinned crooked, dragged his right hand across the stone, scratching a small gouge. Half anchor, half beast head, with a tiny nick on the anchor's lip, an imperfection only someone who had held that seal would know. Enough, he rasped. I return a name to the rope. And he sagged. Not dead, gone under like a diver. The gray cloak cinched my forearm and shoved me down the side tunnel. Go, she said. Bone Road. I looked back in time to see Muir pitch a lamp at the steps. Smoke boiled up, thick and blind, the bowman's view gone to soot. Moray shielded the chest with his body, muscled it into a niche. The bondrider swore through the cough. Don't shoot the words, he barked. Shoot the carrier. A bolt hissed past my ear and clacked into a column. The Bowen Road was narrow, shelves of skulls and femurs ghosting our shoulders. The air tasted like salt bone. We ran. Her hand was startlingly warm. Who are you? I panted. Word people, she said, not looking back. My name would only distract you. Pursuit rattled the stones. At a kink, my foot slipped. The medallion rang against a stack of bones. A child's bell, cruel and light. We hit a young brick wall. She slid a thin blade into the mortar and worked. One brick loosened and a seam opened. Second niche, she said. Same kind you used before. She pushed me through. And you? I keep Eldon breathing long enough that his voice can't be replaced. She pressed a pellet of scentless wax into my palm. If you must seal outside, use this. Her fingers closed over mine. One brief anchor, and she was gone into the smoke. I crawled and rolled into a low aisle of a side chapel. Above, the bells shook metal over water. I hugged a pillar, heart pounding hard enough to bruise ribs. A silhouette lifted from a plinth, Moray. He had come by another artery, swift as script. The original is safe, he said, not asking if I was. Eldon, alive. He left a mark. Moray's eyes caught a rare spark. Good. The chip on the anchor, it belongs to the seal of. He stopped himself, as if speaking the name might turn it into breath. No names yet, not until we have the hand on the wax. And him, I meant the bondrider. He doesn't kill words, Moray said. He bends them. The only trap is to lay his coat between 2 pages and press until he's flat. I didn't fully understand, but I recognized the shape of a scribe's snare, not a cut hand, but a broken tongue. The chase noise faded. Smoke had swallowed the stare. Moray placed a stitched square, the silversmith's mark, in my hand. From now on you change lanes. You don't answer to Aiden everywhere. With me, you're the shadow scribe. Alone, you're the pin bearer. With Mary, you remain Aiden. He met my eyes. A name is a coat. Change coats so words don't die with men. I left St. Anne's as the day tilted. A pale strip tore the cloud like scrubbed steel. The city murmured like surf. In the market, someone hawked a suicide letter, the bondrider's forgery making its rounds. But at St. Giles' door a young cleric read 3 words, clear and slow. Strangled, before, explosion. Heads turned. A small stake in a crumbling bank, but it stood. I went to Greyfriars to see if Eldon would survive sunset. The gray cloak waited at the gate, smoke on her hem, a fine white line of fatigue across her eyes like a knife mark on old wood. He's breathing, she said, but the hounds have the scent. I won't keep him long. She handed me a hard nub like horn. The broken chip from the seal. He pried it loose when they shoved him. Keep it. My pulse jumped off beat. A fragment of the monster's skull lay in my hand. Do you know her name? I asked, meaning Mary without admitting it. She smiled that thin, triple-meaning smile. Don't call me Mary's woman. I belong to the words. But if you must speak to her, tell her this: there is still a road back. She turned and slid into the stone color like a brushstroke fading into ground. The bells of St. Giles spilled a long note. Out toward Carberry, flags began to prickle the horizon like saw teeth. Rumor condensed, lairds gathering, wind veering. I pressed the medallion, fingered the sealed chip, felt the ring go warm, then cold. The two breaths of this story. The chapter was full: a half-born confession, a smell that won't burn, a broken chip of bloody wax. Carberry ahead, crypt behind. Between them, a spear of a question: who do we bring to the light first, the name or the words? Wind shifted, wet with rain. I drew my hood and quickened my step. Before dusk bled out, I needed to reach Dunbar and set this chip beside the hand that once told me, the strong decide the ending. This time I would put order before ending. If required, I would change coats, change names, so the words would not be burned. At the end of the lane, a child ran past, twirling an old hemp cord, whistling a tune with no title. Moray's 3 words knocked once in my skull: a name's a coat. I pulled mine tight and walked into the changing guard of the dark. The bargain of 2 queens. Mist bit like a beast. I tore through the black ribs of yews, heart hammering the bars of my chest, steel and shouting still rattling in my ears. 2 blank pages sweated to my palms like 2 bodies without souls. I clutched them and cursed myself for turning proof into a void. A void 3 sides would rush to pack with their own desires. Yet the ring throbbed warm and steady, not panicked, as if it knew I had just yanked a grenade pin from another man's hand. A thornlash scored my cheek. Hooves hissed behind me. A hand clamped my mouth and dragged me into a mossed niche. A blade kissed my throat. Quiet, low, cold, but not cruel. I held still until wet leather and a ghost of lavender slipped under my nose. The hand left. Gray cloak. She gave me a water skin, blinked once. You just did a thing all 3 sides will hate. I know. I looked at the 2 blank sheets. If I hand them to any one of them, the graveyard won't be the only place bleeding tonight. Blank, she said, grazing a margin, doesn't mean nothing. Blank is a mask. Are you sure they're truly blank? I just looked. I began, and the ring tapped bone like a knuckle on a door. I held a page to our guttering flame. Nothing. Gray cloak smiled, pinched a nub of Moray's scentless wax and a thimble of ink from her sleeve. Smell, she reminded me. I stroked the wax along the edge. The page shivered, like skin in cold water. Heat unfurled in the ring. Letters began to bloom, not on top of the white but through it. Thin coils knitting into sentences as if someone were writing across smoke. Not fire, strangled before explosion. The gloved hand bears a birthmark on the left ear. The anchor seal is chipped. Palimpsest, she murmured. Layer over layer. Everyone else thinks they're blank. Only someone who knows wax, smell, and a ring can lift the mask. She slanted me a look. Don't reveal it all. Blank is how you bargain. I stowed the sheets. My sweat cooled a notch. Hooves slid past. Gray cloak peered toward the graveyard. They're shifting their formations now. You just wrecked a quiet paper capture. They'll try a loud person one. As in, they take you, or cut you quiet. She scanned the hedgerow. They can't let blank exist without a hand to hold it. And Mary? I asked. She just told me to burn the paper. What does she think when the paper has a second skin? She'll understand, Gray cloak said, without hesitation. And she'll use it to bargain. But she won't be allowed to talk alone. The other one wants a say. Elizabeth. I sighed. She won't come. She'll send Sydney. Sydney opens doors. Gray cloak fixed me. Tonight, 2 queens bargain, not on a field ringed with blades, but under a cracked chapel roof, where blank can bridge 2 speeches. You'll carry the blank. Where? St. Roque, South Bank. 8th bell. Go by water, not by fire. And remember, reveal enough. Don't be foolish enough to peel the whole second skin. She pressed the seal's chipped fragment into my palm. The broken tooth of the anchor, sharp as a fish's. If you must, tie this to the page's edge. Let them see blank can bite. Then she was gone, like a wind changing its mind. I slogged to St. Roque through rills of green scum and ankle-deep mud. At the 8th bell, the chapel lifted from the hill like a rib cage. Inside, oil lamps guttered. Mary stepped from shadow, raindrops jeweling her face like glass. From the rear door, Lady Sydney slid in, silent as a revenant, her hem whispering dust, her eyes catching firelight like chips of amber. They stopped, looked, not bows, not names, two knives laid parallel on one anvil. Your freedom, for Bothwell, Sydney opened, voice dry. You leave Scotland under English protection. You surrender what remains of the casket, and any document tying you to Kirk O'Field. Protection, Mary echoed, lip tight. You mean prison? She turned to me. Aidan, what do our blanks put on the table? I drew a sheet. Both women leaned. Fire showed only white. Sydney's mouth tilted. A parlor trick. I ran scentless wax along the left margin. Breath on glass, strangled before explosion. Left ear birthmark, chipped anchor. Sydney's breath snagged. Mary's eyes narrowed, like prayer finding bone. We have a man with a left ear mark, Sydney said at once. A council clerk, not Bothwell. She speared Mary with a look. Will you let him fall in public, rather than your lover? A vein jumped at Mary's throat. Her voice stayed flat as slate. I will see any hand on that rope pay its due. As for my lover, a thin smile. That is my word. I did not order it. You'll say that in an English court? Sydney pressed. Before the peers, with blank only half unmasked. I'll say it anywhere I can drive a nail of truth into ground, Mary answered. The rest of the blank stays with those who can smell it. Sydney weighed 3 beats. Bothwell, I will give him to you, Mary said slowly, as if swallowing a bone. But not in exchange for perpetual humiliation. I ask one condition. Any judgment against me comes after Carberry, not before. You want a trade timing, Sydney said. I want a trade order, Mary corrected. They made me sign their new order. This time I choose my own. Their faces held the same glint. Not hatred, but the quiet recognition of 2 women born on the trident of power. Sydney turned to me. You keep the blank. You will stage it. Betray us, and London will reduce you to ash. Mary's gaze joined hers. Betray me, and Edinburgh won't find you a grave. And if I betray no one, I said, only the traps inside the words. You'll die slower, Sydney said, neat as a cut. Mary's eyes closed and opened. Or live just long enough to take a knife meant for me. A crack outside, the wrong kind of wind. Sydney's hand found her hilt. Mary gestured. I blew the lamp out. In the dark the ring warmed, a warning. Breath held beyond the wall. Resin thickened the air. The bondwriter. He came not with soldiers, but with ink. I signed to them. We backed into a harder shadow. The door eased. He slid in. Bookkeeper's stoop. Left ear birthmark dark as thumbprint. He laid a roll on the broken altar, uncorked ink. I've come, he said to the dark, to write your ending. Or to sign your own. I said from the gloom. He paused, didn't turn. Names, he said slow, are coats. I have several. I brushed wax along the blank. 3 phrases glowed. He chuckled. Palimpsest. I've taught you too well. I set the chipped tooth on his parchment. Every coat has a seam. Sydney snapped the lamp to life. Mary stood tall, hair a dark flame. Right, she said. Right. Bothwell rode to Carberry of his own will. Right. I go because my people will not have blood. Right. The man with the left ear mark set the rope. And seal with your broken anchor. He looked up, his first human look. Under resin and rules sat something softer, almost tired. You'll kill me, he said. No, Sydney said, winter calm. We'll leave you alive. Outside, horses took the slope. Sydney to Mary. We leave by 2 roads. You to Carberry. I to set our stake at Coldstream. Mary nodded, and to me. Aidan, the blank goes with you. On the hill, I needed to show only 3 words. Which 3? Change the ending now, she said. Leave the name for later. We broke like 3 arrows from a string. I slid downhill by water. The ring held heat like a pocket stone. In my hands the blank lay quiet as snow, yet breathing. At my belt the chipped tooth pricked skin. Every seal has teeth. In the east the sky went gray. On the horizon the Carberry woods stood like a herd of dark animals that had chosen not to move. I knew the chapter closed here. The bargain had reset order, not justice yet, but enough to tilt the wind. I, the letter bearer, would go into a night forest where hunters no longer needed paper to kill. There would only be smells, cuts, and breath. And the blank, a blank that bites, would be the thinnest lamp I had. Mary stepped once closer, hem sodden with mist whispering over a cracked slab. She was no throne image. She was a woman driven to the wall, and her eyes still burned with stubborn heat. She bent and whispered for me alone. "You don't know, Aiden, some nights I dream Darnley is alive, knocking at my door, asking why I stood and watched him die. I wake with wet hands. I never gave the order, but I never stopped it. Do you understand?" My silence was the rope around his neck. She lifted her head, voice thick. "I don't ask your pardon. I ask you to choose what you leave to Scotland's children. Don't let a nation be chained to a confession even I cannot swear is true." Lady Sydney laughed, clean, blade short. She circled Mary and breathed at my ear. "You hear her. She confesses her silence as sin. That's gold to Elizabeth. She doesn't need Mary innocent. She needs Mary weak, enough to cage, not enough to kill. Scotland with no king, no queen, only a piece on the board. Do you want to watch a country turned into a pawn, Aiden? If not, give me the paper. London will shelter you." The ring flared. A vein of cold light ran the page's edge, and the veiled lines shivered. I understood in a rush. None of them wants the whole truth. Mary needs a rescuer story. Elizabeth needs a binding pretext. Bothwell needs perfect silence. Truth, if it lives at all, is only a shadow in my eye. Hooves rolled nearer, heavier, like weather. Even the earth seemed to brace. A black flag with a torn tail licked the mist. Bothwell. Mary drew a breath, crushing the crucifix until it bit. Sydney dropped her visor. Her horsemen slid into line. I stood between, paper to my chest, feeling the weight of two kingdoms. Mary tilted her head, whispered, "If I fall, remember, Carberry will stain the flags. But blood won't wash paper." Sydney's tone was iron. "Don't wait for Carberry, Aiden. Don't wait for blood. End it here. Carberry." The name cored the air like an auger. The forest night waited ahead where all three sides would bear every fawn. Like it or not, I had been dragged to the middle of the board. I tightened my grip on the biting blank and walked into the weather. The night forest and the invisible hunters. I broke from the graveyard with frost still clinging white to the grass, hands empty, chest pounding as if it meant to burst. I had nothing, no pages, no proof. Only the ring etched Aiden burning like a coal, each heartbeat a tap of the smith's hammer. Go, don't look back, go. The forest received me with wet cold and the smell of moss. The canopy latched shut overhead, swallowing the long retreat of hoofbeats, swallowing the iron clatter I'd left behind among the tombs. Behind me, three factions hacked at one another until the sound thinned to weather behind a wall of leaves. I fixed on the one thing that held my line true, the heat of the ring and the knowledge that if I stopped, night would crease me like a used sheet and toss me into the fire. The path was all mud and roots, knuckled like an old hand. I shouldered through nettles, went down hard, rose with my mouth full of iron. Each time I thought I'd shake in pursuit, another sound lifted, dogs in the distance, a short whistle, then silence. Noblemen don't chase like fishermen. They set nets out of deliberate quiet. I unwound a leather tie, tore half my tunic, smeared it in mud, and hung it low to throw the scent. Then I dove through a bristle of sedge. The ring flashed cold, wrong way. I stopped, turned slow, no markers, no stars, only a stand of trees that did not consent to strangers. I shut my eyes, pressed the ring to my palm. A hair-thin pulse of blue slid across the rime of moss and came to rest on a twisted oak, the trunk bent like a spine. I slipped behind it and found a narrow runnel in the earth, just wide enough for a man to crawl. I wriggled in as the dogs burst overhead. Claws raked soil, a voice hissed orders. They paused at the oak, snuffed, and moved on as if my scent had snapped in two. I held my breath and counted beats until the sound unspooled among the boughs. The runnel bled into a narrow stream. The water was black as ink, freckled with the last glints of night. I cupped it, washed blood from my ribs until it knifed the bone. When I looked up, something waited on the far bank, small, thin, wrapped in rough cloth. A child? A dwarf? The hood hid the face. Only a pointed chin and two dark eyes showed. "This way," it said, voice dry as a leaf yet clear. "If you want to see dawn." I waded in, teeth locked as the water salted my wounds, dragged myself out the far side. The child didn't wait, melted into bog myrtle and bone grass. I kept tight on the drift of its hem. We threaded crooked firs, slid a slope of rot, and stopped at a low mouth in the hill veiled with vines. In it said, "We have a single breath." "Who are you?" I asked. No answer. But when I ducked, it leaned to my ear and breathed like wind. "I am what's left of a name that was erased." My heart lurched. "Aiden." It neither nodded nor denied. 2 fingers touched my ring. The ring flared, blue and bright. And for one live tick I saw a memory that wasn't mine. A young scullion washing tankards at Kirk O'Field, the reek of saltpeter, a loop of hemp, a gloved hand closing on a throat, a gasp that never grew teeth. The vision blew to ash. When I blinked it clear, the child stood deeper in the cave, pointing to a carving, a feather, and an eye. "Their door," it said. "If you don't want them to eat you, don't open it." Who are they? The writers and the erasers. Wind combed the outer vines. A short-coated trill rode it. The hunters were stringing a new net. The child signed silence. We flattened in the dark, listening to boots on stone and the dry tang of lamp fat. Thump! A soft little sound like a mosquito. I inched, and a short dart. No feathers, a reed too, stuck in the wood beside the mouth. Blowpipes. The archer didn't need to see. He knew where breath would find a crack. The child pulled me back, palm to my chest. The ring cooled, the blue died. I held air while 3 more thups stitched the entrance, then silence. A leaf fell, touched a dart, chimed faintly. The child waited long, then slid its hand away. "You can't run it out," it said. "The forest doesn't belong to you tonight. It belongs to the ledger keepers." I've met them. I thought of ink-stained hands, of wax edges, of tidy margins. "They took me out of the story. Not only you," it said. "They cut anything that kinks the line. 2 versions. They keep one and bury the other. If a man jumps in from elsewhere, they send him back, or erase him. Then why are you still here?" The child looked up, eyes deep as wells. "Because I wasn't chosen. I'm jammed between 2 deaths. I'm nothing but an echo in a ring." A colder wind slid in, wet leaf and stone. The child cocked its head, listening without hurry. Then, like reading, "You won't see morning unless you bargain." "With whom?" "If you want truth to live, talk to the people who keep it." It jerked its chin at the feather eye. 3 taps. Mouth shut. "Blood. Blood. Not any blood. Blood that's written." I looked at my hands. I had written, in 2025, with keys, pins, microphones. Here I had only skin and blade. I hesitated. The child shook its head. "Else at dawn you'll hang like a stoat on a branch with a neat label." I clamped the ring in my teeth, nicked my fingertip, pressed 3 drops to the feather and the eye, and tapped the stone thrice. The wall breathed. A chill went out from the heart of the rock. The carving trembled, the eyelid rose a slit. Ink smell sighed through. The child motioned me in and did not follow. "You're not coming?" "I can't," it whispered. "I'm an echo. You're a misplaced original. They see originals." "Who are you?" I asked again. A smile, the first I'd seen, quick and cold as a falling star. "I'm the part you forgot." Then it folded into the bracken like a dream someone crushed in a fist. I slipped the cleft. The ink scent was ocean deep. Lamplight hung from wooden arms that grew out of the walls, each hand holding a dry quill. The passage opened into a round room. Skins were racked in tiers like honeycomb. In the center stood a long table and a circle of gray hoods. Their fingers were the color of old iron, black with ink, silvered with knife cuts. One lifted his face. I knew him. The museum librarian who'd looked through me in 2025. The same eye corners, the same slow-lidded patience, only younger and without glass. "Welcome, traveler," he said, turning a page in his voice. "You knocked the right door." "Why you?" I asked, hearing my voice slant. "Are you at both ends?" "Keepers follow stories, not calendars." He laid down his pen. "You're prying at the spine of a case we stitched 400 years ago with 4 colors of thread." "I'm not prying anything," I said rough. "I just want the truth not to die in your trap." "Truth," he repeated, tasting an antique word. "And what did you see beyond 2 blank pages?" I had no mouth for it. He nodded, as if he'd waited for the failing. "White is our verdict. When 2 opposing versions both sever the artery, we erase both. So the tale can live. A dead story kills a country. You let people die for paper," I said, Darnley. The others, even Aiden bitter on my tongue. He neither flinched nor smiled. He drew a small thing from a drawer, a white quill with a sliver-bone shaft. "You came to bargain," he said. "Two roads. One, return the ring and all you've gathered. We'll hem the line shut. In exchange, we carry you to the instant you fell. No one remembers you ever came, not even you. Two, keep the ring, keep the live coal, and we let the forest eat you until your entry reads a single word. Missing. Is there a third?" I asked. "I write what I saw. Not confession, not plea. A record." Darnley was strangled. The blast was theater. The rest, let history judge. The hoods rustled, a bird shiver around the room. The librarian was still for a season, then opened a different roll to a grid gap, a place for a marginal copy. "We call it the Nameless Supplement," he said. "It exists, but only the stubborn find it. It topples no thrones, burns no churches, but it itches the eyes of men who wish to sleep. You may write there. In return, you take our mark." "What mark?" He set the quill in my palm. It fit like a handle I'd used for years. He touched my ring, blue flared, ran down into the shaft. When it went out, a fine line of cold traced my metacarpals, as if someone had written the first line inside my blood. "The mark of the margin," he said. "From now on, what you write won't burn easily, not because it is strong, but because it slips. It lives in the thin between two stones." The supplement breathed pale. I bent, and the quill met the skin. The blood at my fingertip married the ink in the shaft, a colorless ink that shows only in their light. I wrote slowly, staking each word. Night of 10 to 11 February 1567. Kirk O'Field. The victim did not die of explosion. Ligature marks present. Powder used to stage the scene. Gloved hand, left ear birthmark. Red bond, anchor plus beast's head. My hand shook. The ring cooled notch by notch, as if in ascent. I reached the line. This verdict does not end at Mary, nor at Bothwell, and the librarian cleared his throat. "Enough," he said, "if you mean to live." "I haven't written their names," I answered. "No names, only signs. The reader may connect." He watched a long moment, then slid the skin away. My lines sank into the grain like a snake down damp soil, leaving a faint trail for the patient. He nodded acceptance. "The night forest still has hunters," he said. "You won't pass without bait." "What bait?" He pushed a wafer of wax, resin cold and bright. On its face the anchor and the beast's head. "Look closer," and a hairline crack cut the anchor. "Leave it where you want the hounds to gather," he said. "The forest believes there's royal blood there. Go the other way." I pocketed it. He didn't withdraw his hand. His eyes had changed, a softer wash, like daybreak slipping along a page. "One more thing," he said. "You think you came to mend one murder, but to get out of night, you must go where day is weakest." He tipped his head, as if hearing a bell only he could hear. "Sterling, the child James. They're the fourth weights." "I thought 3 factions were enough to bleed a country," I said. "Who's the fourth?" "Not England. Not the Lords. Not Mary." A smile without pleasure. "The men who write lessons for boys who will be kings." The gray hoods rose together. No shout, no drum. Only an ink draft snuffing half the lamps. The librarian led me back to the cleft. "When you step out," he said, "they won't see the door you used, but they'll smell the wax. Don't regret. Don't turn. And remember, the margin isn't outside the text. It's where words live while the main body sleeps." I nodded, then paused. "Aiden, the part that's left." He shrugged. "The echo follows the ring bearer until the tale closes. If you open day at Sterling, perhaps it will sleep. If not," he left the rest unwritten. It didn't need script. I slid out. The night hit like a cold wave. Pine needles rasped soft, a flock whisper. I ran low along the water cut, turned left at the twisted oak, tucked the wax wafer into a root crook. Resin rose, rich as bait. The hound swung to it. I looped wide, crossed the stream, and drank a mouth of black sky. At the forest's edge the road to Sterling surfaced, dim and hard. Dawn hadn't come, but a pale bruise showed on the horizon. Not light yet, only ink feathering at the edge of a page that wanted to turn. I tightened on the quill. The ring was iron cool, no longer a threat. Behind me the dogs barked at a royal ghost. I walked faster, carrying the supplement in my blood and an echo pacing me, light enough to hear only when the wood fell absolutely still. "Sterling," I said aloud, a draft for the sentence I would have to set. James. And the fourth. The forest closed behind. The road opened, not straight, not safe, but written. And in my own time I understood. While there are still words, there is still the smallest chance to tilt history's arrowhead, if only by a hair. Ashes and the crown. The road to Stirling was not only mud and cold wind. It was a passage through layers of darkness heavier than the night forest itself. I walked like a sleepwalker, carrying in my pouch the fragment of wax that had deceived the hunting dogs, and in my hand the silver quill the keeper of the ledger had given me. Each time I touched it, I felt more clearly a fissure spreading across history. No one ever truly controlled the truth. They merely stuffed different versions of it into the hands of those reckless enough to carry it forward. And now, that fool was me. When the castle of Stirling rose out of the pale dawn, I no longer felt exhaustion. Only a crushing silence remained. Towering stone walls, the banner of Scotland drooping in the wind, and somewhere inside, the child James, Mary's son, the one destined to wear the crown, slept in his cradle. I passed through the narrow gate. The guards looked once at the ring and the quill, then stepped aside, as though they had been waiting for me all along. In the frigid hall, I found Mary. She looked thinner, draped in a gray cloak that weighed on her like ash. She was no longer the defiant queen from the graveyard, nor the desperate woman at Carberry. She sat before a hearth of dying embers, her gaze flickering with the last spark of stubborn flame. "You came," she whispered, her voice dry, spent. "What do you bring me? A confession? A plea? Or a sheet of white silence?" I did not answer. I placed the silver quill on the table. She looked at it, then let out a short laugh, the bitter laugh of someone who knew the game too well. "They found you, didn't they? Those men in gray, keepers, erasers, gods with ink instead of thunder." I had heard whispers of them. I thought it nothing more than tales to frighten children. I opened my mouth to ask who had told her, but another voice broke in from the far shadows of the hall. Low, sharp, and not of Scotland. "And you believed, Your Majesty, because we do not frighten. We choose." A tall, gaunt man stepped forward, clad in black trimmed with red, a leather-bound book in his hand. My blood froze. His face was one I knew, the librarian from the museum, but not the gentle old scholar, nor the gray-hooded keeper. This was something else. This was another incarnation, the hunter of memories. Mary flinched back, fear flashing across her eyes. My breath caught, the weight of the forest night still heavy on my shoulders. "You," I stammered. "You're everywhere?" "The librarian, the keeper, the hunter?" He gave a thin smile. "No, I am the fourth. You have seen three, Mary, Elizabeth, Bothwell. I am the one without crown or country, only ink. We decide which part of history is told, and which part must die." He set the book upon the table. At first the pages looked blank, but when the firelight struck, words bled through, not in Latin nor Scots, but in modern English. Dates from 2025. My heart lurched. You knew I would come. You thought finding the ring was chance." He tilted his head. "No, we placed it in the wall for you. We needed someone from the future, someone to write a marginal account untouchable to all but us. Only that way could history open another escape." Mary's hand clenched on the table. "Escape for whom? For Scotland, or for you?" The hunter did not answer. He opened the book and slid it toward me. "Write. Not confession, not plea. Write what you saw, with your own blood, so the story will not remain white and empty." I recoiled. His words scraped my skull like nails on wood. I knew, if I wrote in that ledger, I would not merely record the truth, I would be bound forever into their game. But if I refused, the Darnley case would vanish entirely, and I with it. Mary stepped close, her hand light on my shoulder. She whispered, "Do not let him decide for you. Write, but write for yourself. If not, you'll be nothing but his word." I looked at her, then at the silver quill. The ring burned, urging me on. Before me was the hunter's book, behind me, the ashes of a crown, inside me, the unvoiced echo of Aidan. I understood. The ending of this trial was not in Mary, not in Elizabeth, not in Bothwell. It rested in the hand that wrote, and in the decision whether I would write at all. The book lay open, its pages trembling like the lungs of a dying beast. The firelight stretched the hunter's shadow across the wall until it seemed twice his size, a black pillar of ink looming from the page itself. Mary sat at the table's corner, fingers interlaced, eyes fixed on me. Not only hope, but terror shone there. She knew a single drop of ink could condemn a dynasty. Right. The hunter murmured, each word weighted like stone. You are no longer a traveler. You are a bearer of the pen. Fulfill your role. The silver quill trembled in my hand. A thin blue glow seeped from the ring into its shaft, as though blood ran through a new vein. I remembered the inscription in the crypt. No escape unless you sacrifice your own blood. Perhaps this was the sacrifice, not by sword, but by script. My voice shook. If I write, whose truth survives? Mary's? Bothwell's? Elizabeth's? He smirked. You still don't understand. There is no truth. Only what is written. What remains on the page lives. What isn't written dies. Mary slammed the table, surging to her feet. You speak as if you were God, but truth is no game of ink. The hunter turned the book toward her, mockery in his eyes. Would you swear by your crown that you knew nothing of Darnley's death? She froze. Silence swallowed the hall. The fire revealed in her eyes both exhaustion and fracture. At last, she turned away and whispered, I did not kill him, but I did not save him. And sometimes silence is its own blade. The words sliced through me. That was confession, but only I and the hunter had heard it. He chuckled, closing the book halfway, then fixed his gaze on me. You see? Even a queen's words are nothing but lines waiting to be written or erased. If you want to keep them, write. If you want to erase them, stay silent. But do not think silence is neutral. Silence is also a choice, and history will write it for you. Aidan's echo rang in my head. You are the misplaced original. Do not let them write you out. I looked at Mary. She trembled, but her eyes clung to mine, pleading, save my son. Save Scotland, even if it means erasing me. I looked at the hunter. Calm, certain, like a judge already holding the verdict. I looked at the book. White, but not empty. A pit, waiting to swallow whatever I cast in. My grip tightened. The quill descended. The ring flared. A drop of blood fell from my finger, staining the page red. I drew a breath, and in that moment I knew, whatever I wrote, I would no longer be a bystander. Mary's voice cracked, almost breaking. If you must write, write for life. Not for power. The hunter's lips curled. Write for the victor. For only the victor reads the book. I shuddered, but the quill touched the page. A faint sound, like flesh splitting, escaped as the first word emerged, not from me, but from the ring itself. Aidan. I exhaled and kept writing. Not confession, not plea, a record. The night of February 10th, 1567. A man strangled in the dark. An explosion staged to conceal it. A crown silent. A queen who did not speak. A servant who saw but was not named. He vanished, but his echo remains. When the last line fell, the ring went dark, its fire spent. The book snapped shut on its own, sealed with the quill's feathered clasp. The hunter inclined his head, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. Mary slumped in her chair, gasping, relief and despair tangled in her breath. I lifted my gaze. Now it's done, isn't it? You have what you wanted. What about me? The hunter's smile caught the firelight, a red gash across his face. You are written now. You are no longer guessed, no longer misplaced. You belong to the untitled margin. As long as it survives, so do you. Mary turned away, whispering. But the price always comes last. I staggered back, as if I had just signed a sentence not only for Darnley, not only for Mary, but for myself. The question gnawed. Had I saved the truth, or only added another layer of ash to a crown already burned? Then, faint as a dream, a sound pierced the silence, a child's cry. From behind the thick wall, fragile, yet sharp enough to cut through the hall of ashes. Mary's shoulders jerked, trembling. The hunter did not look back. He only smiled, as though he had been waiting. The future, he murmured, is not in the words you just wrote. It is in the throat of that child. One day he will wear the crown, and today's story will be his lesson. The cry faded. The hearth spat its last sparks. I looked at Mary. Her eyes carried not only grief, but the terror of a mother who knew the crack in history had already widened beyond her grasp. I looked at the sealed book and understood. The next chapter would not be written by me, nor by her, but by the child when history forced him to read. Ashes and the crown. The road to Stirling was not only mud and cold wind. It was a passage through layers of darkness heavier than the night forest itself. I walked like a sleepwalker, carrying in my pouch the fragment of wax that had deceived the hunting dogs, and in my hand the silver quill the keeper of the ledger had given me. Each time I touched it, I felt more clearly a fissure spreading across history. No one ever truly controlled the truth. They merely stuffed different versions of it into the hands of those reckless enough to carry it forward. And now, that fool was me. When the castle of Stirling rose out of the pale dawn, I no longer felt exhaustion. Only a crushing silence remained. Towering stone walls, the banner of Scotland drooping in the wind, and somewhere inside, the child James, Mary's son, the one destined to wear the crown, slept in his cradle. I passed through the narrow gate. The guards looked once at the ring and the quill, then stepped aside, as though they had been waiting for me all along. In the frigid hall, I found Mary. She looked thinner, draped in a gray cloak that weighed on her like ash. She was no longer the defiant queen from the graveyard, nor the desperate woman at Carberry. She sat before a hearth of dying embers, her gaze flickering with the last spark of stubborn flame. "You came," she whispered, her voice dry, spent. "What do you bring me? A confession? A plea? Or a sheet of white silence?" I did not answer. I placed the silver quill on the table. She looked at it, then let out a short laugh, the bitter laugh of someone who knew the game too well. "They found you, didn't they? Those men in gray, keepers, erasers, gods with ink instead of thunder." I had heard whispers of them. I thought it nothing more than tales to frighten children. I opened my mouth to ask who had told her, but another voice broke in from the far shadows of the hall. Low, sharp, and not of Scotland. "And you believed, your majesty, because we do not frighten. We choose." A tall, gaunt man stepped forward, clad in black trimmed with red, a leather-bound book in his hand. My blood froze. His face was one I knew, the librarian from the museum, but not the gentle old scholar, nor the gray-hooded keeper. This was something else. This was another incarnation, the hunter of memories. Mary flinched back, fear flashing across her eyes. My breath caught, the weight of the forest night still heavy on my shoulders. "You," I stammered. "You're everywhere?" "The librarian, the keeper, the hunter?" He gave a thin smile. "No, I am the fourth. You have seen three, Mary, Elizabeth, Bothwell. I am the one without crown or country, only ink. We decide which part of history is told, and which part must die." He set the book upon the table. At first the pages looked blank, but when the firelight struck, words bled through, not in Latin nor Scots, but in modern English. Dates from 2025. My heart lurched. You knew I would come. You thought finding the ring was chance." He tilted his head. "No, we placed it in the wall for you. We needed someone from the future, someone to write a marginal account untouchable to all but us. Only that way could history open another escape." Mary's hand clenched on the table. "Escape for whom? For Scotland, or for you?" The hunter did not answer. He opened the book and slid it toward me. "Write. Not confession, not plea. Write what you saw, with your own blood, so the story will not remain white and empty." I recoiled. His words scraped my skull like nails on wood. I knew, if I wrote in that ledger, I would not merely record the truth, I would be bound forever into their game. But if I refused, the Darnley case would vanish entirely, and I with it. Mary stepped close, her hand light on my shoulder. She whispered, "Do not let him decide for you. Write, but write for yourself. If not, you'll be nothing but his word." I looked at her, then at the silver quill. The ring burned, urging me on. Before me was the hunter's book, behind me, the ashes of a crown, inside me, the unvoiced echo of Aidan. I understood. The ending of this trial was not in Mary, not in Elizabeth, not in Bothwell. It rested in the hand that wrote, and in the decision whether I would write at all. The book lay open, its pages trembling like the lungs of a dying beast. The firelight stretched the hunter's shadow across the wall until it seemed twice his size, a black pillar of ink looming from the page itself. Mary sat at the table's corner, fingers interlaced, eyes fixed on me. Not only hope, but terror shone there. She knew a single drop of ink could condemn a dynasty. "Right," the hunter murmured, each word weighted like stone. "You are no longer a traveler. You are a bearer of the pen. Fulfill your role." The silver quill trembled in my hand. A thin blue glow seeped from the ring into its shaft, as though blood ran through a new vein. I remembered the inscription in the crypt. No escape unless you sacrifice your own blood. Perhaps this was the sacrifice, not by sword, but by script. My voice shook. If I write, whose truth survives? Mary's? Bothwell's? Elizabeth's? He smirked. You still don't understand. There is no truth. Only what is written. What remains on the page lives. What isn't written dies. Mary slammed the table, surging to her feet. You speak as if you were God, but truth is no game of ink. The hunter turned the book toward her, mockery in his eyes. Would you swear by your crown that you knew nothing of Darnley's death? She froze. Silence swallowed the hall. The fire revealed in her eyes both exhaustion and fracture. At last, she turned away and whispered, I did not kill him, but I did not save him. And sometimes silence is its own blade. The words sliced through me. That was confession, but only I and the hunter had heard it. He chuckled, closing the book halfway, then fixed his gaze on me. You see? Even a queen's words are nothing but lines waiting to be written or erased. If you want to keep them, write. If you want to erase them, stay silent. But do not think silence is neutral. Silence is also a choice, and history will write it for you. Aiden's echo rang in my head. You are the misplaced original. Do not let them write you out. I looked at Mary. She trembled, but her eyes clung to mine, pleading, save my son. Save Scotland, even if it means erasing me. I looked at the hunter, calm, certain, like a judge already holding the verdict. I looked at the book, white, but not empty, a pit, waiting to swallow whatever I cast in. My grip tightened. The quill descended. The ring flared. A drop of blood fell from my finger, staining the page red. I drew a breath, and in that moment I knew, whatever I wrote, I would no longer be a bystander. Mary's voice cracked, almost breaking. If you must write, write for life. Not for power. The hunter's lips curled. Write for the victor. For only the victor reads the book. I shuddered, but the quill touched the page. A faint sound, like flesh splitting, escaped as the first word emerged, not from me, but from the ring itself. Aiden. I exhaled and kept writing. Not confession, not plea, a record. The night of February 10th, 1567. A man strangled in the dark. An explosion staged to conceal it. A crown silent. A queen who did not speak. A servant who saw but was not named. He vanished, but his echo remains. When the last line fell, the ring went dark, its fire spent. The book snapped shut on its own, sealed with the quill's feathered clasp. The hunter inclined his head, satisfaction glinting in his eyes. Mary slumped in her chair, gasping, relief and despair tangled in her breath. I lifted my gaze. Now it's done, isn't it? You have what you wanted. What about me? The hunter's smile caught the firelight, a red gash across his face. You are written now. You are no longer guessed, no longer misplaced. You belong to the untitled margin. As long as it survives, so do you. Mary turned away, whispering, but the price always comes last. I staggered back, as if I had just signed a sentence not only for Darnley, not only for Mary, but for myself. The question gnawed. Had I saved the truth, or only added another layer of ash to a crown already burned? Then, faint as a dream, a sound pierced the silence, a child's cry. From behind the thick wall, fragile, yet sharp enough to cut through the hall of ashes. Mary's shoulders jerked, trembling. The hunter did not look back. He only smiled, as though he had been waiting. The future, he murmured, is not in the words you just wrote. It is in the throat of that child. One day he will wear the crown, and today's story will be his lesson. The cry faded. The hearth spat its last sparks. I looked at Mary. Her eyes carried not only grief, but the terror of a mother who knew the crack in history had already widened beyond her grasp. I looked at the sealed book and understood. The next chapter would not be written by me, nor by her, but by the child when history forced him to read.